I stand in front of the meticulously prepared feast, rendered speechless by the effort I've poured into it. Yet, as I glance around the table, my heart sinks. Why would Mia, my esteemed brother-in-law's wife, be so mercilessly cold towards me? Sophia, a 27-year-old office worker, shares her life with her husband Tom and their 3-year-old son. Tom, her senior by 4 years, and she initially embarked on a relationship rooted in professional dynamics. Their connection blossomed over shared drinks, leading to a romance that culminated in marriage just a year later. Now, nestled in their cozy home, they relish the joy of parenthood and the promise of a growing family. However, amidst this domestic bliss, a thorn emerges: Mia, the wife of Tom's brother Jack. Let me introduce you to Tom and Jack. Tom is Jack's elder brother by 10 years. Their father tragically passed away in an accident during their youth, leaving their mother, who had previously been a homemaker, deeply shaken. Despite her efforts to recover and return to work, she could only manage part-time hours, having previously dedicated herself to running the household. In response to the family's financial strain, Jack, then a college student, made the selfless decision to leave his studies and seek employment to support them. He declared, "I want Tom to have a proper college education," and tirelessly toiled without complaint. Thanks to Jack's sacrifices and some scholarships, Tom was able to attend college and secure a position at his current company. Jack beamed with pride when Tom and Sophia, his future wife, announced their engagement. At every opportunity, Tom expressed his profound gratitude to Jack, even shedding tears of appreciation at their wedding, declaring, "Without you, I wouldn't be standing here today." Emotions ran high as the room was moved by his heartfelt words. Jack never once displayed a hint of superiority towards Tom. He always approached life with generosity, warmth, and consideration towards both Tom and Sophia. However, after Sophia and Tom settled into their new home near Jack's family, Mia, Jack's wife, began making unsettling comments. She often remarked to Sophia, "You should be grateful to my husband." Jack's demanding job frequently kept him away on lengthy business trips and required him to work late into the night. On these occasions, Maya would invariably show up at Sophia and Tom's doorstep without warning. Living just a short walk away, Jack and Maya would bring their children over for dinner and baths, leaving Sophia to tend to them before returning home, ready for bed. Maya's demands extended to meal preferences, dictating, "I'm not in the mood for Western cuisine today. Make something Japanese," or "My child insists on having hamburger steak tonight," placing Sophia in a difficult position. Despite her discomfort, Sophia couldn't assert herself, mindful of the indebtedness owed to Jack. "Tom, remember, it's because of Jack that you're where you are today. Thanks to him, you went to college and landed a job at a prestigious company." Jack, on the other hand, struggled after high school and is still trying to climb the career ladder. If only he had gone to college, things would be different for him. That's why we're in a new house while they're in an older one. You owe him for all he's done for us, Maya would often remind Tom, leaving him speechless and unable to refute her claims. Though he occasionally voiced concerns about her delegating too much household work to Sophia, given that Sophia works full-time while Maya is a homemaker, he hesitated to address the debt he owed to Jack. "Sorry, but it's because of my brother that I'm here today. Could you please try to work things out with Mia?" Tom pleaded with me. Reluctantly, I agreed to his request. However, our conciliatory approach only seemed to embolden Mia, leading to a surge in her demands. Her vexing behavior fell into two main categories. Firstly, she would frequently drop by our house to dine or bathe her children. And secondly, she often exploited my hospitality to enhance her image in front of our relatives. On the occasion of our relatives visiting, I'd like to prepare dinner for them and host them, she declared. Initially, I assumed I would also get the chance to socialize with my own family. Yet after I finished cooking, she promptly ushered me out, insisting, "Our relatives will be arriving soon, so it's best if you leave." Later, I overheard Mia and our relatives praising her culinary skills, crediting her with all the cooking. This scenario repeated itself each time Maya invited relatives over. I would cook, be sent home, foot the bill for ingredients, and Maya would take all the credit without even lifting a finger to help. Moreover, I was always tasked with arranging mid-year gifts and thank you presents for Jack's bosses and relatives who had supported him. These gifts were invariably sent under Maya's name, with her dictating instructions to me on what to do. At every family gathering, Jack's superiors and relatives would commend Mia for being such a devoted and accomplished wife. often telling me, "You should learn from her, Sophia." I lost count of how many times I heard that refrain. I swallowed my frustration and calmly said, "Tom and I are the ones preparing these gifts. We're willing to do it, but you need to cover the costs. We have our own obligations to send mid-year and year-end gifts, and it's becoming too expensive for us." Maya dismissed my concerns. "That's nothing compared to what Jack sacrificed. He paid for your tuition and living expenses, Tom. Are you seriously complaining about the cost of a few gifts?" she retorted. Turning to me, she accused, "You know Jack gets praised because of the effort I put into these things. That's part of repaying Jack's kindness, isn't it? A wife who doesn't help her husband repay such a debt is the worst. Plus, it's I keep track of the timing for these gifts. You won't forget them either." Mia often exploited Jack's favor towards Tom to impose her demands on us. We were responsible for all seasonal letters, New Year's cards, and mid-year and year-end gifts. Whenever anything went wrong, she would say, "Tom owes his success to Jack," as if it were a cliché. She would also say things like, "You should consult us if you want to take on such tasks," without offering any guidance. I felt humiliated as I tallied up the expenses for each month and every event. Then came the breaking point. Maya requested that I prepare a meal for about 20 of our relatives for a summer gathering at her house. Typically, our relatives gather at the home of a more senior family member during summer and New Year's events. However, Maya insisted, "Please come to our house." Her relatives were delighted, believing her to be a great cook and a considerate hostess, but she expected me to handle all the preparations. Tom had other commitments that day, leaving me to manage everything on my own. When I asked Mia how she planned to pay for the event, she said, "We'd have to cover it ourselves. Preparing food and drinks for 20 people is a significant drain on our family finances." I suggested splitting the bill, but she flatly refused. "Jack has endured so much hardship. He deserves at least this much," she insisted. I then suggested discussing the matter with Tom, but she exploded, "I will not forgive you if you do that. Jack is busy with work right now. Are you repaying kindness with ingratitude?" I was at my wit's end, but the dinner party was fast approaching. As the date neared, I noticed Mia showed no signs of urgency or preparation. With no other option, I began planning the event several days in advance. I also started making some behind-the-scenes arrangements. On the day of the dinner, I began preparations early in the morning, working tirelessly and managing to finish everything just a few hours before the guests were due to arrive, despite my exhaustion. After I finished all the preparations, Maya came to check on me. "Maya, everything is ready. I believe the guests can arrive at any time now," I informed her. Glancing at the dishes on the table, Maya exclaimed, "What are you doing? The main dish should be eel rice." "You never mentioned eel rice," I replied, taken aback. "You should have known that. This is so embarrassing. Our relatives are coming for the summer festival, and they'll think I can't even prepare eel rice. Order it right away." "No, I've already prepared enough food for everyone, and the fish I bought is fresh. I'm not going to prepare a different dish now," I responded firmly. "It has to be eel rice," Maya insisted, refusing to listen to my protests. She demanded we order a special batch for everyone, using our own money. When I asked her to cover the costs, she flatly refused. I couldn't take it any longer and voiced my frustrations. I reminded her that she always made me cook whenever she invited relatives over, that she came to our house daily when Jack was away, and that we handled all the mid-year and year-end gifts, including today's preparations. Maya countered with the usual talk about Jack's sacrifices. Fed up, I decided to reveal what I knew. "Maya, you even had an affair with someone you met on a dating app, didn't you? You're a housewife, yet you leave so many responsibilities to me." I got curious and looked into it. "Oh, so you know about that," she responded with a laugh, "but I'm afraid you don't have any proof. Besides, I'm handling that situation just fine. By cooperating with me, you're essentially returning the favor. It's all part of the deal." Maya remained unfazed despite the revelation about her affair. Instead, she reiterated what Jack had done for Tom, saying, "You will be repaying our family for the rest of your lives." At this point, I had reached my breaking point. I silently removed the food and started packing my belongings. "I'm leaving. I will never return," I said firmly as I walked out. Maya yelled something about ordering eel rice, but I ignored her and left. A few minutes later, my phone began ringing repeatedly with calls from Mia. When I finally answered, she sounded panicked. "What? What's going on?" Is there something wrong? I asked her, feigning ignorance. I have so many inquiries. She continued frantically. I rearranged the dishes you made, and I ordered eel rice, paying for it with my own money. But none of the relatives showed up. It seems they know everything we discussed earlier. I couldn't stop laughing. I was also astonished that she had tried to salvage the situation by rearranging the food I had prepared. The reality was as follows. I couldn't tolerate Mia's arrogance any longer. Before she could criticize me further, I decided to talk to Jack directly, hoping he would offer some sound advice. I believed that Jack, unlike Mia, wouldn't hold their past support over my head. When I explained the situation to Jack, he seemed skeptical. He had always seen Mia as the perfect wife who made a good impression on her relatives. She presented herself as their ideal partner, preparing hot meals with a smile for Jack when he returned from work. Meals that often came from our kitchen. She arrogantly took large amounts of food from our house and misled Jack, claiming they frequently invited me to dinner but didn't want to bother him with the details. She never mentioned my involvement in the gifts, always smiling and saying, "It's natural for a wife to handle these details to save her husband's face." Jack was always impressed, thinking, I married a wife who's too good for me. So when Jack heard my side of the story, he was speechless. Being a good man, he didn't accuse me of lying but believed there must be some misunderstanding between Maya and me. So, I pondered on how to present him with evidence. Would you allow me to gather some evidence? I asked Jack respectfully. With his permission, I decided to discreetly record Maya's conversations during her visits to our house, especially those where she displayed selfishness about food. Music. I captured a conversation where she insisted that we owed her obedience due to Jack's kindness, and I asked Jack to listen to it. When he heard it, he was speechless. Additionally, I informed Jack about an upcoming dinner party Maya and I were supposedly preparing together for her relatives. With his consent, I recorded everything from the moment I started preparing the meal to Maya's outbursts about using my money to order eel rice and her admission of the affair. I had arranged a video call with Jack and his relatives in advance, informing my own family about the scheduled time and date. It was during this call that Jack and his relatives finally learned the truth about Mia. After I departed, Jack's relatives confronted Mia over the call, expressing disbelief at the revelation that I had been handling all the year-end and mid-year gifts, taking advantage of Jack's kindness, and even engaging in adultery. Maya attempted to maintain her composure, but the weight of the evidence left her speechless. The majority of her relatives denounced her, severing ties with her and leaving Maya stunned. Jack, who had postponed his work to be present for the call, returned home and confronted Mia about the situation. "I am disappointed," he told me later. He revealed to Mia that her actions had caused distress for his beloved younger brother and his wife in his absence, and that her admission of an affair had shattered him. Maya broke down in tears, confessing that she had targeted me out of jealousy over our younger age and our nicer home. She claimed her affair stemmed from loneliness due to Jack's frequent absences and admitted to devising a plan to manipulate us after hearing Tom's heartfelt thank you letter to Jack at our wedding. I was infuriated by Mia's relentless harassment, but I also felt a pang of sympathy for Jack. I hadn't worked tirelessly for Tom's sake to create a sense of indebtedness, but rather out of love for my dear younger brother. My efforts were not fueled by the desire to hold them over his head in the future. I was proud to see Tom thriving in a reputable company, growing into a remarkable individual. As for Maya's disparaging remarks about my salary, I explained to her that it wasn't Tom's fault. It was simply my own lack of ambition. Further revelations surfaced about Maya's conduct. We learned that she had left their children unattended at home while she met her adulterous partner. Jack decided to pursue divorce proceedings, seeking custody of their children along with alimony. Maya vehemently opposed the idea of divorce, eventually agreeing to a slight reduction in alimony in exchange for a proper divorce and custody arrangements. Her affair had been uncovered by Jack, who also demanded full alimony. In the end, Maya moved back to her parents' home and took on multiple part-time and day jobs to meet the financial demands of double alimony and child support. A few months later, Maya appeared disheveled when she met me for a visit to see her child. Later, Jack apologized to us and covered the expenses for the ingredients and alcohol from the dinner party. He also promised to reimburse us for the meals Maya had consumed at our house and for the gifts she had made us prepare. But after discussing it, Tom and I declined the offer. I apologized to Jack because while this incident was meant to address Mia's wrongdoing, it also brought shame upon him and his family, I expressed, reflecting on the situation. I doubt Mia would have felt any remorse if we hadn't taken action, Jack chuckled. If anything, I am at fault for not noticing Mia's behavior until now, he added with a hint of sadness. Jack is currently juggling work responsibilities while caring for their child. We maintain regular contact with him, and on days when he's overwhelmed, we offer to look after his child at our home or invite him over for dinner. We've learned a valuable lesson about how some people can make you feel indebted even when they haven't done you any favors. Tom and I laughed together, reflecting on the experience.
My name's Miranda, and this is my story. My parents, Jack and Linda Thompson, had it all: successful careers, a beautiful house in the suburbs, and a plan. A plan that involved having a son, their precious heir. Instead, they got me. I remember the day I realized I wasn't the child they'd hoped for. I was 5, playing with my dolls in the living room when I overheard my mom on the phone. "Yes, it's true. We're having a boy." Her voice was filled with an excitement I'd never heard before. "Oh, you have no idea how long we've waited for this. Finally, a son." Those words cut deep. I didn't fully understand then, but I felt it, the sting of being second best, unwanted. Things changed quickly after that. Mom's belly grew bigger, and so did the distance between us. Dad was always working, and when he was home, all the talk was about the baby boy on the way. One day, Mom called me into the kitchen. "Miranda, sweetie, we need to talk." I climbed onto a chair, my legs dangling. "What is it, Mommy?" She didn't look at me as she spoke. "You're going to stay with Grandma for a while. Isn't that exciting? Mommy and Daddy need to prepare for the baby. You'll have more fun with Grandma anyway." And just like that, I was packed off to Grandma's house. Grandma Rose was Dad's mom, a retired English literature professor. She lived in a cozy little house filled with books and the smell of freshly baked cookies. Living with Grandma was different. She actually paid attention to me, listened when I talked, and didn't seem bothered by my presence. We'd spend hours reading together, and she'd tell me stories about when she was a teacher. For the first time in my life, I felt loved, truly loved. 2 years flew by. I was 7 when Dad showed up at Grandma's doorstep. "It's time to come home, Miranda," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your brother needs you." Brother, the word felt foreign. As we drove home, Dad filled the silence with awkward small talk. "Your brother's name is Ethan, he's 1 now. You're a big sister now, Miranda. That's a big responsibility." I nodded, not really understanding what that meant. Little did I know, my childhood was about to end. We pulled into the driveway of our house. It looked the same, but it felt different. Mom was waiting at the door, a toddler on her hip. "Miranda, meet your brother, Ethan," she said, her voice oddly formal. I looked at the chubby-faced boy with curly blonde hair. He gurgled and reached out a pudgy hand towards me. "Hi, Ethan," I said softly. And just like that, at 7 years old, I became more than a sister. I became a caretaker, a responsibility, a built-in babysitter. My childhood slipped away, replaced by dirty diapers, constant vigilance, and the weight of expectations I was too young to bear. While my classmates were playing with dolls and learning to ride bikes, I was changing diapers and warming bottles. "Miranda, can you watch Ethan while I make a call?" Mom would say, not really asking. I'd nod, already reaching for my little brother. It wasn't that I didn't love Ethan, I did, fiercely. His toothless grin and grabby little hands had won me over from day one. But the constant responsibility was overwhelming. Days blurred together in a haze of school, chores, and babysitting. I was exhausted, struggling to keep up with my homework while making sure Ethan was safe and happy. But no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. One fateful day, I took Ethan to the park. He was 2 now, full of energy and curiosity. I turned my back for just a second to tie my shoelace, and in that moment, disaster struck. Miwanda. Ethan's cry pierced the air, followed by a thud. I whirled around to see him sprawled on the ground, his knee bleeding. Panic seized me as I scooped him up, trying to soothe his wails. When we got home, Mom exploded. "How could you be so careless?" she shouted, cradling Ethan. "You're supposed to watch him." "I'm sorry, I just..." "No excuses," Dad chimed in, his face red with anger. "Go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment later." I fled upstairs, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't fair. I was doing my best, but I was just a kid myself. The incidents piled up. Ethan burning his tongue on hot porridge because I didn't blow on it enough. A bump on his head from a fall I couldn't prevent. Each time, the punishments got harsher, the disappointment in my parents' eyes more evident. Through it all, Grandma Rose was my lifeline. She'd visit when she could, her presence a balm to my battered spirit. During one visit, I overheard her confronting my parents in the kitchen. "This is unacceptable," Grandma's usually gentle voice was sharp. "Miranda is a child, not a nanny. Your favoritism towards Ethan is hurting her." "Mother, please," Dad sighed. "These are our children. We know what's best for them." "Do you?" Grandma challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, you're neglecting one child in favor of the other." "That's enough," Mom cut in. "We appreciate your concern, but this is our family. We'll raise our children as we see fit." I threw myself into my studies. School became my sanctuary, a place where I could shine on my own merits. And shine I did, my grades a silent rebellion against the notion that I wasn't good enough. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was standing at a crossroads. High school was behind me, and college loomed ahead. Despite the constant struggle at home, I'd managed to excel in my studies. It was my ticket out, my chance at freedom. When the acceptance letter arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Not only had I been accepted to study investment management, but I'd also received a full scholarship. My hands shook as I read the words over and over again. "Mom, Dad," I called out, racing down the stairs. "I got in. Full scholarship." "Oh, thank goodness," Mom sighed, relief evident in her voice. "That saves us a fortune. We need to start saving for Ethan's college fund." My heart sank. Of course. It wasn't about my achievement. It was about the money they wouldn't have to spend on me. The first few months were a whirlwind of classes, new friends, and the exhilarating taste of freedom. The money from my parents, combined with the small amounts Grandma Rose secretly sent, was just enough to scrape by. I was careful with every penny, knowing how precious this lifeline was. But 6 months into my college journey, everything changed again. My phone rang one evening as I was studying for a finance exam. "Miranda," Mom's voice came through, curt and businesslike. "We won't be sending you any more money. Ethan needs tutors if he's going to have any chance at college. We need to focus our resources on him now." I felt the familiar sting of rejection, of being cast aside. "But Mom, I can barely..." "You're an adult now, Miranda," she cut me off. "You need to solve your own problems. We can't keep supporting you forever." The next few weeks were a blur of stress and sleepless nights. I scoured job boards, applied to every position I could find. Finally, I landed a part-time gig at a nearby cafe. The hours were long, the pay was meager, but it was something. Balancing work and studies was brutal. I'd rush from classes to shifts, then stay up late into the night studying. Dark circles became a permanent fixture under my eyes, and my grades started to slip. One particularly rough day, I called Grandma Rose, desperate for a friendly voice. "Miranda, sweetheart, you sound exhausted," she said, concern evident in her voice. The dam broke. Through tears, I told her everything, the cut-off allowance, the grueling work hours, the struggle to keep up with my studies. "Those absolute," Grandma cut herself off, taking a deep breath. "Listen to me, Miranda, you focus on your studies. I'm increasing your monthly allowance. And don't you dare argue with me about it." "But Grandma..." No buts, she said firmly. You deserve this education, and you shouldn't have to kill yourself working to get it. Your parents, well, let's just say, I'll be having words with them. True to her word, Grandma's support allowed me to cut back my work hours. I could breathe again, focus on my classes. My grades improved, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. The years at college flew by in a blur of textbooks, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage, diploma in hand, magna cum laude gleaming on the certificate. As I scanned the audience, I spotted Grandma Rose, beaming with pride. My parents and Ethan were noticeably absent. With my degree in hand, doors opened. I landed a job at Stonebridge Investments, a prestigious firm in the city. The salary was more money than I'd ever seen, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. To save money, I moved in with Sarah, a co-worker who became a fast friend. Our tiny apartment was a far cry from the dorms, but it was ours, and it felt like freedom. When my first paycheck arrived, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I scoured every second-hand bookstore in the city until I found it, a rare first edition of Grandma's favorite author. The following weekend, I took a train to my hometown, gift in hand. Grandma's face lit up when she saw me at her door. Miranda, what a wonderful surprise. I presented her with the wrapped book, watching as tears welled in her eyes when she opened it. Oh, my dear girl, she whispered, hugging me tight. You shouldn't have. I wanted to, I said simply. You've done so much for me, Grandma. As we chatted over tea, I mentioned visiting my parents. Grandma's face tightened slightly, but she nodded. I'm sure they'd love to see you. But when I called, Mom's voice was distant. Oh, this weekend? We're quite busy, Miranda. Perhaps another time. The rejection stung, but I pushed it aside. I spent the weekend with Grandma instead, relishing her warmth and genuine interest in my life. As I boarded the train back to the city on Sunday, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Time marched on. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and my career soared. My bosses praised my work ethic and insight, and the bonuses started rolling in. Soon, I was able to afford my own apartment, a small, sun-filled space that was all mine. One evening, as I was settling in for a quiet night, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. Miranda, she said without preamble. These teachers, they just don't understand Ethan. They're giving him such poor grades. He barely scraped into City College. I bit my lip, choosing my words carefully. Mom, maybe college isn't the right path for everyone. There are great vocational courses Ethan could. Don't be stupid, she snapped. Your brother is brilliant. Much smarter than you, actually. He's just misunderstood. He'll show everyone, you'll see. As I hung up, I gazed around my apartment, the tangible proof of my success. Yet somehow, I still felt like that little girl, desperately seeking approval. Life has a funny way of appending expectations. While I was building my career, brick by careful brick, Ethan's college experience was crumbling around him. It was a crisp autumn day when Mom called again, her voice tight with frustration. Ethan's been expelled, she said without preamble. He's coming home. She launched into a tirade about unfair professors and a system designed to fail students like Ethan. I listened, biting my tongue against the urge to point out the thousands they'd spent on his education, the loans they'd taken out to rent him a luxury apartment, the generous allowance they'd provided. All things I'd never had. We'll figure something out, Mom concluded. Ethan just needs time to find his path. I thought about Ethan, now 21, returning to our childhood home, while I, at 27, was forging ahead in my career. The contrast was stark, but I pushed the thought aside. Comparison is the thief of joy, after all. Life, however, had other plans for me. It was at a company event that I met Jack, tall, kind-eyed, with a quick wit that made me laugh like I hadn't in years. Our whirlwind romance swept me off my feet, and before I knew it, we were standing in a small chapel, exchanging vows in front of a handful of loved ones. Grandma Rose was there, of course, beaming with pride. My parents attended too, though their smiles seemed a bit forced. Ethan didn't come, citing a vague prior commitment. Jack and I moved into his apartment, a cozy space that quickly became home. His parents, Tom and Ellen, welcomed me with open arms, their warmth a balm to my soul. A year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. The joy that filled me was indescribable. When we announced it to our families, Jack's parents were ecstatic. My parents' reaction was more subdued. "Do you know what it is yet?" Mom asked immediately. I shook my head. It's too early to tell. As the months passed, their interest in the baby's gender became almost obsessive. When we finally revealed it was a boy, their relief was palpable. "A grandson," Dad exclaimed. "That's wonderful news, Miranda." I tried not to read too much into their reaction, focusing instead on preparing for our son's arrival. Little Alexander came into the world on a rainy Tuesday, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger as if to say, "I'm here, Mom. I've got you." As I held him, I vowed to give him all the love and support I'd craved as a child. While I was navigating new motherhood, Ethan continued to drift. He picked up odd jobs here and there, but nothing stuck. He was still living at home, much to our parents' poorly concealed frustration. During a rare family dinner, I tried to broach the subject gently. "You know, Ethan, there's an entry-level position opening up at my company. I could put in a good word." "Miranda," Mom cut me off sharply. "Your brother doesn't need your charity. He's just taking his time to find the right opportunity." Dad nodded in agreement. "You were lucky, Miranda. Things just fell into place for you. Not everyone has it so easy." I blinked, stunned. Lucky? The sleepless nights studying, the years of juggling work and school, the constant struggle to prove my worth, none of that felt like luck. But I swallowed my retort, not wanting to start an argument. As I looked around the table, at my parents' defensive postures, Ethan's sullen expression, and little Alexander babbling happily in his high chair, I realized something profound. Family isn't just about blood. It's about support, understanding, and unconditional love. And sometimes, the family you choose can fill the gaps left by the one you're born into. As Alexander's 5th birthday approached, we planned a trip to my hometown, Jack, our son, and me. Our first stop was Grandma Rose's house. We spent a wonderful afternoon with her, Alexander captivated by her stories and the old photos she showed him. As we were leaving, Grandma pulled me aside. "Your parents have been struggling," she said softly. Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones?" The next day, we stood on my parents' doorstep. Mom answered, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Dad was in his armchair, Ethan slouched on the couch. They both looked up as we entered. After awkward greetings and stilted small talk, Mom cleared her throat. "Miranda, we need to talk to you about something." What followed was a halting explanation of their financial troubles. Medical bills, Ethan's ongoing unemployment, the lingering college debt, it had all piled up. "We hate to ask," Dad said, not meeting my eyes, "but we could use some help." I glanced at Jack, who gave me a subtle nod. Despite everything, these were my parents. Of course, I heard myself say. "I can send some money each month." The relief on their faces was palpable. We worked out the details, $1,500 a month, with the understanding that they could reach out if emergencies arose. Over the next 2 years, I faithfully sent the money each month. There were occasional requests for extra help, a broken water heater, unexpected car repairs, which I always obliged. It felt good to be able to help, to maybe finally earn their approval. When Thanksgiving rolled around, we found ourselves back in my childhood home. The house was full, aunts, uncles, cousins, and Grandma Rose all crowded around the dining table. As we ate, Mom and Dad couldn't stop talking about Ethan. "He's been at his new job for 3 months now," Mom beamed. "Such a hard worker." Dad chimed in, "Did you see the new sofa cushions? Ethan bought those with his first paycheck. So thoughtful of him. I glanced around the room, noting the new curtains, the fresh paint on the walls, the updated appliances in the kitchen. All purchased with the money I'd been sending. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to spoil the mood. Jack squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Alexander, oblivious to the undercurrents, happily chatted with his cousins. The Thanksgiving dinner continued, the chatter of family filling the air. I was just starting to relax when Alexander tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can I go play in the other room?" he asked, his eyes bright with the restlessness of a 5-year-old at a grown-up gathering. I nodded, ruffling his hair. "Sure, sweetie. Just don't make too much noise, okay?" As Alexander scampered off, I turned back to the conversation. Barely a minute had passed when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, confusion furrowing my brow. The caller ID read, "Mom." I looked up at my mother, sitting directly across from me at the table. "Mom, why are you calling me?" She frowned, shaking her head. "I'm not calling you, dear. My phone's in the living room." Just then, Alexander reappeared in the doorway, my mother's phone clutched in his small hands. The room fell quiet as all eyes turned to him. "Mommy," he said, his voice ringing in the sudden silence. "I found Grandma's phone and I wanted to see who she talks to." I saw a funny name, Cash Cow, and clicked on it to see who it would call. "Why did it call you, Mommy?" "What's a cash cow?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Cash cow. Is that all I was to them? I looked around the table. My relatives sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. Grandma Rose's face was a mask of shock and anger. And my parents, they had gone deathly pale. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Cash cow," I repeated, my voice trembling. "Is that what I am to you?" My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. My father couldn't even meet my eyes. "Let me tell you all something," I continued, addressing the whole table. "For the past 2 years, I've been sending my parents $1,500 every month. When they've asked for extra, I've sent that too. All those new things you've been admiring? The curtains, the appliances, the fresh paint? That was all bought with my money." I could feel tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I did this despite years of being treated like I was second best. Despite being sent away as a child, despite having to work my way through college while Ethan got everything handed to him. I did it because I thought maybe, finally, you'd see me. You'd be proud of me. My voice cracked on the last words. But instead, I'm just your cash cow. A resource to be milked dry. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jack stood up and put his arm around me, a solid presence at my side. Alexander, not fully understanding but sensing the tension, came and wrapped his arms around my legs. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for my parents to say something, anything. An apology, an explanation, even a denial. But what came next shocked me to my core. My mother's face hardened, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Well, of course you help us. We gave birth to you, raised you, it's your duty. Don't be so sensitive about a silly phone contact." I felt as if I'd been slapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt bubbled to the surface. Duty? Is that what you think this is? Well, let me make this clear, from this day forward, I'm done. No more money, no more help. I'm cutting ties. At the mention of losing financial support, Mom's demeanor changed instantly. Tears sprang to her eyes. "How can you be so heartless? After everything we've done for you." She looked around the table, seeking support from our relatives. But to her surprise, and mine, they remained silent. One by one, they looked away from her pleading gaze. Then Grandma Rose spoke up, her voice quivering with anger. "Heartless? You dare call Miranda heartless after how you treated her? Well, let me tell you something, I want nothing more to do with you either. And you can forget about any inheritance. It's all going to Miranda and Alexander." The room erupted into chaos. Mom was sobbing, Dad was trying to calm her down, and Ethan just sat there, looking bewildered. In the midst of it all, I felt Jack's hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "I think it's time we left," he said softly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. We gathered Alexander and our things, said goodbye to Grandma Rose and the other relatives, and walked out without another word to my parents. True to my word, I stopped all financial support. The call started almost immediately, first pleading, then angry, then downright abusive. When the messages turned into threats, I warned them that I'd take legal action if they didn't stop. Eventually, the calls and messages trickled to a stop. Life went on. I focused on my career, on Jack, on raising Alexander. Grandma Rose became an even bigger part of our lives, her love and support a balm to the wound left by my parents' betrayal. Years passed. Through the grapevine, I heard that Ethan had racked up significant debts. My parents, in a last-ditch effort to bail him out, had to sell their house. The three of them ended up in a small apartment across town. When I heard the news, I was surprised to find that I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, not even anger anymore. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. Today, as I watch Alexander play in our backyard, Jack by my side, and Grandma Rose laughing from her favorite chair on the patio, I realize something profound. I've finally found my place, my worth. And no one can take that away from me.
I remember those days like they were yesterday. Mom, Dad, and me, Megan, the perfect little family. We weren't rich or famous, just ordinary folks living our best life. Dad worked as an accountant, always buried in numbers, but he'd light up when he got home. Mom was a teacher, spreading knowledge and kindness wherever she went. We'd spend weekends exploring the country, piling into our beat-up station wagon and hitting the road. Dad would blast his favorite oldies, and Mom would sing along, terribly off-key but not caring one bit. I'd sit in the back, rolling my eyes but secretly loving every minute of it. Those road trips were the best. We'd stop at dingy diners, ordering greasy burgers and sharing a giant milkshake. Mom would always steal my fries, claiming, "I'm just testing them for poison, sweetie." When we weren't traveling, we'd hit up the local mall. I'd drag them from store to store, trying on ridiculous outfits and begging for the latest toys. Mom was the voice of reason, but Dad was a softie. He'd slip me a few extra bucks when Mom wasn't looking, whispering, "Our little secret, Meggie." Friday nights were pizza nights. We'd order in, sprawl out on the living room floor, and watch cheesy movies. Dad would try to explain the plots, Mom would shush him, and I'd stuff my face with pepperoni, not caring about anything but the moment. I was 11 when Mom started feeling tired all the time. At first, we didn't think much of it. Teaching is exhausting after all. But then came the doctor visits, the worried whispers, the hushed phone calls. I didn't understand what was happening. Nobody told me anything, but I could feel the change in the air. The laughter became less frequent, the road trips stopped, and pizza nights were replaced with quiet, tense dinners. One night, I overheard Dad on the phone, his voice cracking as he spoke. "The treatments aren't working, Mike. I don't know what we're going to do." That's when I knew. Something was very wrong with Mom, and our perfect little world was about to shatter. I wish I could go back to those happy days, freeze time, and stay in that bubble of blissful ignorance forever, but life doesn't work that way. The storm was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For now, I close my eyes and try to remember the good times. The smell of Mom's perfume, the sound of Dad's laughter, the taste of Friday night pizza. Those memories are all I have left of the life I once knew, the life I desperately wish I could return to. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was pizza night, but there was no pizza, no laughter, no Mom. Just silence and the horrible beeping of hospital machines. "Megan, sweetie," Dad said, his voice cracking. "Mom, she's gone." Just like that, my world collapsed. Mom, my rock, my best friend, was gone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stood there numb, as Dad hugged me, his tears soaking my hair. The next few weeks were a blur of black clothes, hushed voices, and casseroles I couldn't bring myself to eat. I kept expecting Mom to walk through the door, to tell me it was all a bad dream. But she never did. Then, about 6 months after we lost Mom, something changed. Dad started going out more. I thought he was getting better, until I saw her. She was tall, blonde, and nothing like Mom. Her name was Karen, and she had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Megan, this is Karen," Dad said, looking nervous. "We've been seeing each other." I couldn't believe it. Mom wasn't even cold in her grave, and he was already replacing her. Karen bent down, her face inches from mine. "Hi, Megan. I've heard so much about you." When Dad wasn't looking, Karen's smile dropped. Her eyes turned cold, calculating. In that moment I knew. This woman was trouble. Over the next few weeks, Karen was everywhere. She'd come over for dinner, watch TV with us, even try to help me with homework. But the moment Dad's back was turned, the mask would slip. "Listen, kid," she hissed one day when we were alone. "I'm here to stay. Don't get any ideas about messing this up for me." I tried to tell Dad, I really did, but he just shook his head. "Megan, I know this is hard for you, but Karen's a good person. You're just jealous. Maybe we should get you to talk to someone." Jealous? I couldn't believe it. My own father thought I was making this up. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a therapist's office, being told I had adjustment issues and difficulty with change. Karen had somehow convinced everyone, Dad, our relatives, even the neighbors, that I was troubled. Poor Megan, I'd overhear her saying on the phone, "She's having such a hard time. There are mental problems. We're getting her the help she needs." Then came the bombshell. A year and a half after Mom died, Dad dropped the news. "Megan, Karen and I, we're getting married. We thought it'd be best if you spent the summer at camp. Give you some time to adjust." But I knew the truth. They were shipping me off so I wouldn't ruin their perfect day with my sour face, as Karen put it. I left for camp with a heavy heart, knowing that when I returned, everything would be different. My home wouldn't be mine anymore. My family was changing, and there was nothing I could do about it. I returned from camp with a knot in my stomach. The house looked the same from the outside, but as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew everything had changed. "Welcome home," Megan, Karen said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We need to talk about room arrangements. With the baby coming, we'll need to make some changes." My head spun. "Baby? What baby?" Dad's face lit up. "That's right, you don't know. Karen's pregnant, you're going to be a big sister." Karen led me upstairs, chattering about nursery colors and baby names. We stopped at my room, or what used to be my room. "We've started converting this into the nursery," Karen said, pushing open the door. My heart sank. My posters were gone, replaced by pastel wallpaper. My desk had vanished, a crib standing in its place. "Where's my stuff?" I managed to choke out. Karen waved dismissively. "Oh, we moved you to the guest room. It's cozier anyway." The guest room was barely bigger than a closet. My things were piled haphazardly on the bed, some boxes still sealed. "This is temporary, right?" I asked, looking at Dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Well, Meggie, with the new baby." I got the message. I was being pushed out, replaced. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, baby showers, and me trying to make myself as small as possible. Karen's belly grew, and with it, her control over our lives. Then, one crisp fall morning, my little brother was born. Despite everything, when I held him for the first time, I felt a surge of love. For a moment I thought maybe things would get better. But Karen had other plans. "Careful, Megan," she'd say, snatching him away. "You might drop him. Or he's sleeping now. Maybe you can see him later." There was always an excuse, always a reason why I couldn't spend time with my brother. Dad was too busy with work and the new baby to notice. Years passed. I threw myself into school, counting down the days until I could leave for college. My brother grew into a sweet, curious kid, but Karen made sure our interactions were limited. Finally, my senior year arrived. One night I overheard Karen and Dad arguing. She needs to learn responsibility, Karen insisted. A job right out of high school would do her good. Dad's voice was firm. No, Sarah wanted her to go to college. We set aside money for it. Megan's going. I'd never been so grateful for my dad standing up for me. When my acceptance letter came, I cried with relief. I was getting out. I was going to start my own life, away from Karen's manipulations. On move-in day, Dad helped me pack the car. Karen and my brother stayed home. I'm proud of you, Meggie, Dad said, hugging me goodbye. Your mom would be too. As I drove away, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. I was leaving behind the only home I'd known, and the little brother I never really got to know. But I was also driving towards freedom, towards a future where I could be myself without Karen's shadow looming over me. College was like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. Advertising became my passion, a world where creativity met strategy, and I could finally express myself freely. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, there was always a nagging ache in my heart. My little brother, barely 6 when I left, was growing up without me. During rare visits home, I'd catch glimpses of the amazing kid he was becoming. Megan. Look what I drew, he'd exclaim, showing me his latest masterpiece. I'd ruffle his hair, cherishing these brief moments. It's awesome, buddy, you're quite the artist. Karen would inevitably interrupt, whisking him away for some urgent task or another. The distance between us grew with each passing year. Graduation day arrived, a bittersweet triumph. As I stood in my cap and gown scanning the crowd, I realized Dad and Karen weren't there. Later, a terse text arrived, congratulations on graduating. Dad, Karen. It stung, but I refused to let it dampen my spirits. I had a future to build. Thanks to my internships and portfolio, I landed a job at a hip advertising agency in the city. Grandma Mom's mom and my guardian angel helped me secure a tiny but cozy apartment. Your mother would be so proud, she said, pressing a check into my hand. This is for rent. She always wanted you to have a good start. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was challenging but rewarding. I made friends, went on dates, and slowly began to heal from the wounds of my past. For 3 years, I lived in relative peace, with only occasional, awkward holiday visits to break the calm. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Megan, it's Dad. I have some news. We've sold the house and bought a new place, bigger, more modern. I was hoping. Well, would you help us move? It might be a good chance for us to reconnect. I was speechless. After years of distance, this sudden olive branch felt surreal. Karen would be happy to see you too, he added, though I doubted that. And your brother? Megan, he's 12 now. He asks about you all the time. I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from more hurt. But another part, the part that still missed my family, that longed for reconciliation, won out. Okay, I said finally. I'll come? Great Dad's relief was palpable. I'll text you the address. See you this weekend. As I packed a bag for the weekend, my emotions swirled. Hope mingled with anxiety, excitement with dread. Whatever happened, this visit would change everything. I just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. I pulled up to the address, my jaw dropping at the sight. The house was enormous, all sleek lines and modern architecture. It looked nothing like the cozy home I grew up in. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Dad opened it, a hesitant smile on his face. Meggie, you made it. Hi, Dad, I said, stepping inside. Karen appeared behind him, her smile as plastic as ever. Megan, how? Nice of you to come, she said, her tone suggesting anything but. I looked around, expecting to see my brother. Where's... Oh, he's staying with my parents for the weekend, Karen cut in smoothly. We thought it would be easier to move without him underfoot. The look in her eyes told me everything. This was deliberate. She'd made sure my brother wouldn't be here, denying me even this small chance to reconnect with him. Swallowing my disappointment and anger, I forced a smile. "So where do you want me to start?" For the next few hours, I threw myself into the work. I scrubbed floors, arranged furniture, and hung curtains. It was easier than trying to make conversation with Dad or enduring Karen's false pleasantries. As I was sorting through some boxes in what would be the study, I came across a pile of framed photos. My heart stopped as I recognized one particular frame. It was a portrait of Mom, the one that used to hang in my childhood bedroom. Her smile beamed at me from beneath a layer of dust. Clutching the photo, I walked into the living room where Dad and Karen were discussing paint colors. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "why is Mom's picture in a pile of junk?" Dad's face fell, a mix of guilt and sadness crossing his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but Karen beat him to it. "Oh, that old thing," she said dismissively. "We decided those photos don't really fit with the new decor. They're a bit superfluous, don't you think?" Superfluous. The word hit me like a slap. My mother's memory, reduced to an outdated decoration. "Superfluous," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "This is my mother, your wife," I added, looking at Dad. Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Megan, we didn't mean." But I was already moving, gathering up every photo of Mom I could find. I found her old jewelry box, a few of her books. Without a word, I carried them out to my car, ignoring Karen's protests and Dad's weak attempts to explain. As I placed the last item in my trunk, I felt a storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger at Karen's callousness, disappointment in Dad's spinelessness, and a deep, aching sadness for the mother I'd lost and the family that seemed beyond repair. I slammed the trunk shut, the sound echoing in the quiet street. For a moment, I considered getting in the car and driving away, leaving this mess behind once and for all. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of Mom, her voice in my head telling me to be strong. Maybe it was the thought of my little brother who I still hadn't seen. Or maybe it was just sheer stubbornness, refusing to let Karen win. Whatever it was, I found myself walking back into the house. Karen was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding to avoid confrontation. Dad stood in the hallway looking lost, so I went back to cleaning, trying not to think about Dad's betrayal. As I was about to leave, Dad caught my arm. "Megan, wait. There's something else." I turned, eyebrow raised. "What now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We're having a housewarming party in a few days. We would really appreciate your help." Before I could respond, Karen swooped in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh yes, Megan, we could really use your assistance. Perhaps you could handle the catering? I'll take care of the cleaning, invitations, and overall organization." I opened my mouth to refuse, but Dad jumped in. "Please, Meggie, all our relatives and friends will be there. We can't manage without you." His pleading eyes wore me down. Despite everything, a small part of me still wanted to make him happy. "Fine," I sighed. "I'll help with the food, I'll even pay for it myself." Karen's smile widened. "Wonderful. We're thinking of an Italian theme. You know, to christen the new kitchen." I nodded, an idea forming. "Actually, I know the best Italian restaurant. I'll order from there. Quality guaranteed." Oh, Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's the name of this restaurant?" "Bella Notte," replied, watching her carefully. She nodded, looking satisfied. "Sounds perfect. We'll leave it in your capable hands then." As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Karen's sudden agreeableness was suspicious, but I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Over the next few days, I threw myself into planning the perfect menu. I called my friend Maria, owner of Bella Notte. "Megan, it's been too long," she answered cheerfully. "Hey Maria, I need a favor. My dad's having a housewarming party, and I'm in charge of food. Think you can help me out?" "For you? Anything. What are you thinking?" We spent an hour crafting the perfect Italian spread. Antipasti platters, handmade pastas, tiramisu for dessert, the works. I spared no expense, wanting to prove I could handle this responsibility. After finalizing the order, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped this party might be a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal our fractured family. The next week dragged by slowly. I kept myself busy with work, but my mind often wandered to the upcoming party. I checked and double-checked the order, making sure everything was perfect. The day before the housewarming party, my phone rang. It was Maria from Vowed. "Hey Megan, I'm a bit confused. Your stepmother called yesterday and asked to move the food delivery to today. Did the party date change?" My heart sank. What? No, it's supposed to be tomorrow. Oh, Maria sounded worried. Well, I wanted to double-check with you before making any changes. I thanked her, my mind racing. After hanging up, I immediately called Karen, my suspicions on high alert. "Hi Karen, just wanted to confirm the party details for tomorrow," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh yes, everything's set for tomorrow at 7 p.m, she replied smoothly. "We're looking forward to it." I thanked her and ended the call, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. It was clear now Karen had tried to change the delivery date behind my back. She wanted me to miss the party entirely. Taking a deep breath, I called Maria back. "Hey, it's me again. I need to cancel the order," I said, my voice tight. "Cancel? But Megan, are you sure? It's a lot of food and it's all paid for." "I know. Keep the payment, consider it a gift. Use the food for the restaurant if you can." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The betrayal stung, but a part of me wasn't surprised. This was classic Karen, always finding new ways to push me out. The same evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my social media and saw my cousin was live streaming from the party. There it was, the housewarming in full swing, happening right now, a day early. I watched, a mix of hurt and anger building inside me, as Karen showed off the new house. She preened for the camera, pointing out design features and accepting compliments from guests. Suddenly a voice off camera asked, "Where's Megan? I thought she'd be here." Karen's face changed, a look of false concern replacing her smile. "Oh, you know Megan, she's always been a bit unsociable. Some mental health issues, poor dear. She said she couldn't make it." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mental health issues? Unsociable? The lies flowed so easily from her lips. Karen quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation back to the house. "Now, who's ready for some amazing Italian food? It should be here any minute." The guests cheered, and Karen beamed at the camera. Half an hour passed, and I could see the guests starting to look restless. Karen's smile became strained as she kept assuring everyone the food would arrive any minute now. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the live stream. Karen's perfectly crafted facade was crumbling before my eyes. Her smile had become a grimace as she dialed the restaurant's number, the speakerphone amplifying every word for the gathered guests. "Hello, Vowed. This is Karen. Where is our food order?" The response was clear and devastating. "I'm sorry, Mom, but that order was cancelled earlier today by Megan. There won't be any delivery." Karen's face contorted with rage. "What? That little John," she shrieked, turning to my father. "Call Megan right now." Dad, looking flustered, pulled out his phone. I watched, heart pounding, as he dialed my number. When I answered, his voice boomed through the speakerphone. "Megan, how could you cancel the food order? You've ruined everything." Taking a deep breath, I replied calmly, "Dad, why did you change the date of the housewarming? Why wasn't I invited?" The room fell silent. Dad's face paled as he stammered, "We," Karen said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged meaningful glances, eyeing Karen and Dad with suspicion. Suddenly, Karen snatched the phone from Dad's hand. "You ungrateful brat," she screeched. "After everything we've done for you, you're trying to sabotage us, aren't you?" I let her rant for a moment before speaking, my voice steady and clear. "I think everyone can see now who really has mental health issues in this family. And it's not me. Karen's hysterical shouting filled the room, but I could see the damage was done. Guests were backing away, some already heading for the door. "I'm done being your scapegoat, Karen," I said firmly. "And Dad, I'm done watching you choose her over your own daughter. Goodbye." I ended the call and closed the live stream, my hands shaking but my resolve strong. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, all of it laid bare for everyone to see. In the days that followed, I ignored the barrage of calls and messages from Dad and other family members. I needed time to process, to heal. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "Megan, I'm so sorry," he began. "I've been blind. I let Karen control everything, and I lost sight of what really matters. Please, give me a chance to make things right." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but something in his expression stopped me. "It's not that simple, Dad. You abandoned me. You forgot about me." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want to change. I promise I'll do better. Please, Meggie." Slowly, cautiously, we began to rebuild our relationship. Dad started calling regularly, and we met for coffee every week. He even brought my little brother along sometimes, away from Karen's watchful eye. As for Karen, I heard through the grapevine that she'd become something of a pariah among the family. Her lies exposed, she retreated into a shell of bitterness. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my career, climbing the ranks at the advertising agency. My creativity flourished, fueled by the emotional turmoil I'd endured. I don't know what the future holds for my family. The wounds are deep, and healing takes time. But for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. I'm living life on my terms, pursuing my passions, and slowly, carefully, allowing love back into my heart. As I look out at the city lights from my apartment window, I can almost hear Mom's voice. "You're stronger than you know," Meggie, she used to say. And you know what? She was right. I'm Hannah, and I met John in college, and we clicked instantly. He was charming, funny, and ambitious. We got married right after graduation and started building our life together. When our daughter Sophie was born, I was over the moon. I poured all my love and energy into raising her, determined to give her the best start in life. I believed in setting boundaries and instilling discipline. Knowledge is power, I'd always tell her. Study hard and you'll go far. John, on the other hand, had a different parenting style. He'd shower Sophie with gifts, buy her sweets, and let her get away with things I wouldn't. "Come on, Hannah," he'd say. "Let her be a kid." It bothered me, but I figured we balanced each other out. As Sophie grew older, it became clear she was a daddy's girl. She'd run to John with her problems, laugh at his jokes, and light up when he came home from work. With me, it was all eye rolls and yes, Mom in that tone, teenager's perfect. I'd bite my tongue, reminding myself that Sophie would understand when she was older. She'd see that my strict approach came from a place of love. But even at 17, Sophie remained firmly in her father's camp. It stung, but I consoled myself with the thought that I was doing right by her in the long run. Despite these small frustrations, I considered myself fulfilled. I had a successful career at a respected clinic, a husband who still made me laugh, and a daughter who, despite our differences, I adored. Life was good, or so I thought. Everything changed on a crisp autumn day. I was doing laundry, a mundane task I'd done 1,000 times before. As I emptied John's coat pockets, my fingers brushed against a piece of paper. I pulled it out, expecting a grocery receipt or a dry cleaning ticket. Instead, I found myself staring at a receipt from an upscale perfume store. The perfume listed was an expensive brand I'd never wear, too floral, too sweet. John knew I preferred subtler scents. I stood there, the washing machine humming in the background, as 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. Was it a surprise gift? But my birthday had passed, and our anniversary was months away. Was it for his mother? But she was allergic to most perfumes. With shaking hands, I took a picture of the receipt with my phone. Then, carefully, I placed it back in his pocket. I needed time to think, to process this information without jumping to conclusions. That evening, when John was in the shower, I checked his coat again. The receipt was gone. I kept my discovery to myself, not breathing a word to John or Sophie, but now that my eyes were open, I couldn't stop noticing things. It was like a fog had lifted, revealing a landscape I didn't recognize. John's late nights at work weren't new, but now they felt different. Big project, honey, he'd say, kissing me on the cheek as he left. Don't wait up, I'd nod and smile, all the while wondering who he was really meeting. His new haircut caught my attention too. He'd always been particular about his appearance, but this was different. Younger. Trendier. When I complimented him, he shrugged it off. Thought I'd try something new. The weekend fishing trips were the worst. Every other Saturday he'd load up his gear and head out to meet his buddies. Fish are really biting lately, he'd say with a grin. I'd watch him drive away, wondering if he even owned a fishing rod anymore. Before finding that receipt, I hadn't connected these dots. Now they formed a picture I couldn't unsee. The thought I'd been avoiding burst to the surface. John had a mistress. I tried to shake it off. This was John, my John. The man who held my hand through 20 hours of labor. The guy who surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays. He wouldn't cheat. But the doubt gnawed at me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, listening to John's steady breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of her. One sleepless night, I found myself scrolling through Facebook. A name caught my eye, Mike Thompson. We'd gone to high school together, and I vaguely remembered he'd become a private investigator. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent him a message. We met at a coffee shop across town the next day. I took a deep breath and spilled everything. The receipt, John's behavior, my suspicions. Mike listened without interrupting, his face neutral. Mike agreed to take the case. As I watched him leave, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Soon I'd have answers, but did I really want them? The next 3 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went through the motions, smiling at my patients, helping Sophie with her schoolwork, making small talk with John over dinner. But inside, I was a mess. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd jump, thinking it was Mike with news. Every time John came home late, I'd search his face for signs of guilt. Every time Sophie mentioned her dad, I'd wonder if she knew something I didn't. "You okay, Mom?" Sophie asked one evening, catching me staring blankly at the wall. "You seem off." I plastered on a smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Lots of clients this week." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. I felt a pang of guilt for lying to her, but what could I say? Your dad might be cheating on me, and I've hired someone to spy on him. John, caught up in whatever or whoever was occupying his time, didn't seem to notice anything amiss. Part of me was relieved, part of me was furious that he could be so oblivious to my pain. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was between clients when my phone buzzed. Mike's name flashed on the screen, and my heart leapt into my throat. "Hannah? Can we meet?" His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop in an hour. The rest of my appointments were a blur. I went through the motions, smiling and nodding at my clients while my mind raced. Mike was already there when I arrived, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. "Hannah," Mike pushed the envelope towards me. "It's all in here. Photos, dates, locations. I'm sorry, Hannah, but your suspicions were right." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. John, my John, with his arms around a younger woman. They were laughing, looking into each other's eyes with unmistakable affection. "Who is she?" I managed to choke out. "Alicia Benson," Mike replied. "She's 28, works at John's company. She's the director's daughter." I flipped through more photos. John and Alicia at restaurants, walking in the park, boarding a yacht. Each image was a fresh wound. They'd been seeing each other for over a year, Mike continued. "From what I've gathered, it's serious. They've talked about a future together." I nodded numbly, barely registering his words. Then a photo made me gasp. It showed John and Alicia at a cafe, but they weren't alone. Sitting with them, smiling and laughing, was Sophie. "No," I whispered. "It can't be." Mike's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry, Hannah, but Sophie knows about the affair. She's met with them several times. Those weekends she said she was with friends? She was with them on Alicia's yacht. There's more. John and Alicia have been buying Sophie expensive gifts. Designer clothes. Jewelry. I think they're trying to buy her silence. I don't remember the drive home. Thankfully, the house was empty when I arrived. I moved on autopilot, packing a small suitcase with clothes and essentials. I couldn't stay here, couldn't face John or Sophie. I checked into a hotel across town, my mind still reeling. Once in my room, I called my boss at the clinic and took 2 weeks off, unpaid. Family emergency. I turned off my phone and sank onto the bed. The envelope seemed to mock me from the bedside table. Unable to help myself, I opened it again. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damning photos. Sophie's smile as she hugged Alicia, John's arm around them both. My anger, which had started as a slow simmer, began to boil over. For years I'd been the understanding one, the peacemaker, the one who bent over backwards to keep everyone happy. Well, I was done with that. My eyes fell on my laptop. Without really thinking, I opened it and logged into my bank account. There it was, Sophie's college fund. I'd been squirreling away money for years, determined to give her the best education possible. It was my way of showing love, even when she pushed me away. Now, looking at that balance, all I could think about was how Sophie had betrayed me. How she'd lied to my face, spent time with that woman, accepted her gifts. My daughter, who I'd sacrificed so much for, had stabbed me in the back. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Years ago, before Sophie was born, I dreamed of opening my own cosmetology office. But then life happened: marriage, a baby, mortgage payments. My dream got pushed aside. I stared at the account balance. It was enough. Enough to start over, to finally pursue my own dreams instead of everyone else's. You know what I said out loud to the empty hotel room? Screw it. This money isn't for Sophie anymore. It's for me. The words hung in the air, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had a future, even if it wasn't the one I'd planned. Emotionally drained, I finally drifted off to sleep, my phone still turned off. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a blissful moment, I forgot everything. Then reality came crashing back. With a deep breath, I turned on my phone. It immediately exploded with notifications. Missed calls from John and Sophie. Voicemails. Text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Their concern, which once would have melted my heart, now felt like acid in my veins. How dare they pretend to care now? I didn't bother listening to the voicemails or reading the texts. Instead, I got dressed, packed my bag, and checked out of the hotel. It was time to face the music. The drive home felt surreal. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. But I squashed that impulse. I needed closure. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw John's car and Sophie's bike. They were both home. Good. I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. John and Sophie rushed out of the living room, their faces a mix of relief and anxiety. "Hannah, where have you been?" "We've been so worried," John exclaimed, moving to hug me. Sophie chimed in, her voice shrill with concern. "Mom, are you okay? Why didn't you answer our calls?" I stepped back, avoiding John's embrace. A cold laugh escaped me, stopping them both in their tracks. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I tossed it on the coffee table, photos spilling out. John and Sophie stared at the images, their faces draining of color. There they were, in glossy 8x10s, John with Alicia, Sophie with them both. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. John was the first to recover, his shock morphing into defensive anger. "Hannah, it's not what you think," he started, his voice placating. "Alicia and I were just friends, and Sophie, she..." "Don't you dare drag Sophie into your lies," I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Sophie jumped in, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Mom, please, I can explain. I only met her a few times, I didn't know." I held up a hand, silencing them both. "Save it, I know everything. The yacht trips, the expensive gifts, the dinners. Every lie, every betrayal." They exchanged a look, and I saw the moment they realized their act wasn't working. The mask slipped away, revealing the strangers beneath. John's face hardened, all pretense of remorse vanishing. "Fine," he said coldly. "You want the truth? Yes, I'm with Alicia. She's young, beautiful, and rich. She makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years." His words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I turned to Sophie, waiting for her contribution to this character assassination. She didn't disappoint. "Alicia is amazing, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's successful, stylish, fun, not strict and boring like you." I absorbed their words, each one a fresh wound. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "I see," I said, my voice steady. "Well, let me tell you both something. John, I want a divorce. I'll have my lawyer contact you." John's eyes widened, but before he could speak, I turned to Sophie. "And you, young lady, you can forget about me paying for your college tuition. If Alicia is so amazing, maybe she can foot the bill." Sophie's jaw dropped. "What? You can't do that. That's my money. I've been counting on it. I want to get into my dream school." "Should have thought about that before you stabbed me in the back," I replied, unmoved by her crocodile tears. "Mom, please," she sobbed, her cool demeanor crumbling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please forgive me. I need that money." But her earlier words echoed in my mind. Strict, boring. Worse than the other woman. Ignoring their protests, I went upstairs and packed the rest of my belongings. As I came back down, suitcase in hand, John blocked my path. "Hannah, let's talk about this rationally," he said, his tone businesslike. "The house, our assets." "My lawyer will be in touch," I interrupted, pushing past him. "I'm done talking to you." The next few weeks passed in a blur. I found a small apartment and threw myself into the logistics of dismantling a 20-year marriage. I hired a lawyer and requested a mediator, determined to handle this divorce as cleanly as possible. The last thing I wanted was a drawn-out, messy court battle. Sophie called incessantly at first. When I didn't pick up, she resorted to texts, then emails. Each message was a mix of apology and demand. I read each one, my heart breaking anew every time. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself staring at my phone, Sophie's number on the screen. My finger would hover over the call button, a war raging inside me. Part of me yearned to hear her voice, to believe her apologies. But then I'd remember her cruel words, her secret meetings with John and Alicia, and I'd put the phone down. Days turned into weeks. Each meeting with John was a test of endurance, conducted in the sterile environment of our lawyers' offices. The man I once loved was now just another face across the conference table, all business and cold efficiency. One day, as I settled into my usual chair, the door opened and Sophie walked in behind John. My heart clenched at the sight of her, but her expression stopped any warm feelings cold. She looked at me with a mixture of condescension and triumph that took my breath away. "Hello, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you don't mind me joining today." Before I could respond, she continued, "I just wanted to let you know that I won't be needing your pathetic money after all. Alicia has generously offered to pay for my education at any top college in the States." She paused, clearly savoring the moment. "Oh, and I'll be living with Dad and Alicia from now on. We're going to be one big, happy family." I felt the eyes of our lawyers and the mediator on me, waiting for my reaction. But I was too tired, too drained to feel much of anything anymore. I simply shrugged. "If that's what you want, Sophie," I said, my voice flat, "I hope you'll be happy." Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment. Had she been hoping for a bigger reaction? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same smug look. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal jargon and asset division. In the end, John and I split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, with the proceeds divided equally between us. With my share from the house sale and the money I'd saved for Sophie's college fund, I had enough to make a fresh start. I found a small but cozy apartment and, after much soul-searching, decided to take a leap of faith. I quit my job at the clinic, and threw myself into creating a business plan for my own cosmetology office. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. All those years of experience, all the dreams I'd put on hold, it was time to put them to use. Weeks of planning, renovating, and nervous anticipation followed. But finally, Hannah's Beauty Haven opened its doors. Those first few months were a whirlwind of long hours, social media marketing blitzes, and the slow but steady growth of my client base. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the day's work was done, I'd find myself scrolling through social media. Sophie's posts would appear on my feed, pictures of her in designer clothes, lounging on Alicia's yacht, always smiling, always looking carefree and happy. Each image was a knife to my heart. I'd wonder if she ever thought of me, if she missed me at all. When her 18th birthday rolled around, I sent her a message wishing her well. Same for her high school graduation. Both went unanswered. A year had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. My cosmetology office, once just a dream, was now a thriving reality. The steady stream of loyal clients from my clinic days, combined with a growing number of new faces, kept me busier than I'd ever been. I'd even hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, as I was finishing up with a client, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Sarah. "Hannah, you won't believe what I just saw," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "I was at the Meadowbrook supermarket, you know, the one on the other side of town, and I swear I saw Sophie working at the checkout." My heart skipped a beat. "Sophie? Are you sure?" "Positive." She looked different, thinner, tired, but it was definitely her. I thanked Sarah and hung up, my mind reeling. Sophie, working at a supermarket. What about college? What about Alicia's promise to fund her education? That night, after closing the office, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked up Sophie's social media. What I found shocked me. All her glamorous photos with John and Alicia were gone. There were no updates, no college move-in pictures, nothing. Her once active profile was a digital ghost town. For days I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to rush to the supermarket to demand answers. But another part, the part still nursing the wounds of betrayal, held me back. Finally, on my day off, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the Meadowbrook supermarket, my heart pounding as I walked through the automatic doors. And there she was. Sophie, my baby girl, looking so different from the confident young woman who'd sneered at me in the lawyer's office. She was thin, almost gaunt, dark circles under her eyes as she mechanically scanned items at the checkout. Our eyes met, and I saw a flash of something. Embarrassment? Shame? Before I could decipher it, she looked away, her cheeks flushing. I approached her checkout, my steps hesitant. "Sophie." She glanced up, then quickly back down at the register. "What do you want?" Her voice was harsh, defensive. "I'd like to talk. Maybe we could get coffee after your shift." "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped, still not meeting my eyes. "Please leave." "Sophie, please." I said leave. She finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else. Was it fear? Stunned by her vehemence, I backed away. Other customers were starting to stare. With a heavy heart, I left the supermarket, climbing into my car with shaking hands. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had happened? Where were John and Alicia? Why wasn't Sophie in college? For days after, I waited for a call, a text, anything. But my phone remained stubbornly silent. I thought about going back to the supermarket, but Sophie's words rang in my ears. "I don't want to talk to you." Just as I was beginning to lose hope, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, I answered. Mom. Sophie's voice, small and uncertain, came through the speaker. "Can we meet, please?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe near my office. As I waited, my mind raced with possibilities. When Sophie walked in, my breath caught. She looked so different from the glowing, confident girl in those yacht photos, so much older than her years. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything." And then, like a dam breaking, the story poured out of her. At first, living with John and Alicia had been a dream. Designer clothes, yacht trips, promises of a bright future. But the honeymoon period didn't last. Alicia started making comments, Sophie said, her eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. Little digs about how much space I took up, how expensive I was. Then she told Dad I couldn't live with them anymore, that there was no money for college. I gasped. But your father? Surely he didn't agree. Sophie's bitter laugh was answer enough. He said I was an adult now, that I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. They kicked me out, Mom. I had nowhere to go. Why didn't you call me? I asked, reaching for her hand across the table. She pulled away, tears in her eyes. I was so ashamed. And then I realized, this must be how you felt when we betrayed you. I couldn't face you after that. My heart broke for her, even as a small, petty part of me whispered, good. Now she knows how it feels. I'm sharing a crappy apartment with a coworker, Sophie continued. The supermarket job barely covers rent and food. I feel so useless. I wanted to wrap her in my arms, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Sophie, I said gently, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you're right, you did betray me. Actions have consequences, and this is something you need to work through. We both cried then, mourning the lost year, the broken trust, the pain we'd caused each other. As we parted, something had shifted between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. That night I tossed and turned, Sophie's story playing on repeat in my mind. By morning I'd made a decision. I called Sophie. I have a proposition for you, I said. I need an administrator at my office. The pay's not great, but it's better than the supermarket. And maybe we can start rebuilding from there. There was a long pause. Then, yes, I'd like that. Thank you, Mom. It's been 6 months since that day. Sophie works at my office now, learning the business from the ground up. She's saving for community college, determined to make it on her own merit this time. Our relationship is a work in progress. There are good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension. The trust we once had is slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt, one day at a time. As I watch Sophie greet a client with a warm smile, I feel a glimmer of hope. We're not the same people we were before the betrayal, the divorce, the year of silence. But maybe, just maybe, we can be something new, something stronger.
I'm Kristen, and until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. Tom and I had been married for 2 years, living in a beautiful apartment in a nice neighborhood. We both had good jobs. I worked at an advertising agency, and Tom headed sales at a sports nutrition company. Our plan was simple: save for a house, then start a family. We lived frugally, sharing one car. Every morning, Tom dropped me off at work before heading to his office. I'd make my own way home in the evenings. It wasn't always convenient, but we were determined. Then Tom's sister, Sarah, came to visit with her 2 kids. She was a single mom. Her husband had died in a car accident. Tom's parents, my in-laws, were super protective of her. They were always trying to make sure she didn't feel lonely, which is why they sent her to stay with us. When Sarah arrived, Tom was over the moon. "Isn't it great to have them here?" he said, helping with her bags. I nodded, trying to match his excitement. "Sure, it'll be nice to spend time together." At first, I thought Tom's attention to Sarah and her kids was sweet. He played with the children, listened to Sarah's problems, and bent over backward to make them comfortable. As the days passed, Tom's focus on Sarah intensified. He started demanding that I put her needs first, too. "Kristen, can you help Sarah with the kids' laundry?" Or, "Why don't you take Sarah shopping? She needs to relax." I was exhausted from work and now had to cater to Sarah's every whim. The breaking point came when Tom said, "Kristen, Sarah's going through a tough time. We need to make her stay as comfortable as possible. Can't you be more understanding?" I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. "Tom, I'm trying, but I'm tired too. I work all day, then come home to cook and clean for everyone. I need a break too." He frowned, clearly unhappy with my response. Sarah's a single mom. She needs our support. You should be more sympathetic. As I watched Tom fuss over Sarah and her kids, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't just a visit anymore. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure I was going to like where it was heading. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah showed no signs of leaving. I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. After long days at the ad agency, I'd come home to cook for everyone and clean up the mess. Tom's constant criticism was wearing me down. "Kristen, Sarah doesn't like spicy food. Can't you make something else?" Tom complained one evening. I bit my tongue, fighting back tears of frustration. "Tom, I'm doing my best. I'm tired too, you know. Sarah's with the kids all day. She's exhausted and has no time to cook," he shot back. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I understand that, but—" "No buts, Kristen. We need to support her." I nodded silently, not wanting to start another argument. I got it. I really did. Sarah was going through a tough time, both mentally and physically. But I was tired of Tom's unfair reproaches. I couldn't wait for things to go back to normal. One evening, as I was scrubbing dishes after dinner, Tom dropped a bombshell. "Kristen, we need to talk," he said, leaning against the counter. I dried my hands, bracing myself. "What's up?" "Sarah's thinking of looking for a job here in the city," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. I froze. "Oh? That's unexpected." "Yeah, isn't it great? But here's the thing," he continued, not noticing my discomfort. "I think you should quit your job and take care of the kids in the house." The dish I was holding slipped from my hands, clattering in the sink. "What? You can't be serious." Tom frowned. "Of course I am. Sarah needs to work, and someone needs to watch the kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Tom, I'm not quitting my job to take care of someone else's children. That's not fair." "Fair? What's not fair is expecting Sarah to manage everything on her own," he snapped. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Okay, let's think about this. Where is Sarah planning to live if she gets a job here?" Before Tom could answer, Sarah walked into the kitchen, a smile on her face. "Oh, didn't Tom tell you? I'll be living here, of course, with my amazing brother. He understands me, supports me. I couldn't ask for a better brother." I stared at Tom, my eyes demanding an explanation. He shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. "Look, Kristen, can we discuss this later?" he said quickly, avoiding eye contact. "No, Tom, we need to talk about this now," I insisted, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm not okay with this arrangement. We can't all live together. It's too cramped in this apartment for 5 people." Tom's face lit up, as if he'd just remembered something wonderful. "But honey, don't you see? This is perfect. We were planning to buy a house anyway. Now we have even more reason to do it sooner. There'll be plenty of space for everyone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Tom, that's not the point. We can't just—" But he cut me off mid-sentence, his attention already elsewhere. "Sorry, Kristen, we'll talk later. I promised the kids I'd play with them." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing in the kitchen, mouth agape, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. From that day on, everything changed. Tom stopped driving me to work, always with the same excuse. "Sorry, babe. I'm really busy this morning." I knew he was lying, but I couldn't prove it. So, I found myself commuting on my own, both morning and evening, adding extra stress to my already hectic days. One afternoon, I came home early from work, hoping to get a head start on dinner. Instead, I walked into chaos. Sarah was sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to some trashy reality show, while her kids ran wild. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "what's going on here?" She barely glanced up. "Oh, hi, Kristen. The kids were bored, so I let them play." I looked around in horror. The walls were covered in crayon scribbles. There were mysterious stains on the couch, and my beloved houseplants, the ones I'd nurtured for years, were knocked over, soil spilling across the floor. "This isn't playing, Sarah. This is destroying our home." I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice. Sarah just shrugged, her eyes already back on the TV. "They're just kids, Kristen. Lighten up." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. "Sarah, I thought you were looking for a job. Have you had any luck?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I've sent my resume everywhere, but nothing good has come up yet. They all want too much work for too little pay. I'm not desperate, you know." I bit my tongue, holding back the retort that threatened to spill out. Of course she wasn't desperate. She had a free ride here, with Tom and me footing the bill and doing all the work. That night, as Tom and I got ready for bed, I tried one more time to talk sense into him. "Tom, we need to set some ground rules. Sarah can't just let the kids run wild like that, and she needs to start contributing to the household chores." Tom sighed, looking exasperated. "Kristen, Sarah's going through a tough time. Can't you cut her some slack?" "Slack? Tom, I've been cutting her slack for weeks. Our home is being destroyed. I'm doing all the work, and you're acting like I'm the unreasonable one here." "Keep your voice down," Tom hissed. "You'll wake everyone up. Look, I know it's not ideal, but it's family. We have to stick together." As I lay in bed that night, listening to Tom's soft snores, I couldn't help but wonder, when did I stop being part of this family? And more importantly, how much longer could I keep living like this? As days turned into weeks, the situation at home only worsened. Tom seemed oblivious to the chaos his sister and her kids were creating. Whenever I tried to establish some order or ask the kids to clean up after themselves, Sarah would run to Tom with complaints. "Tom," I overheard her one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern, "I don't think Kristen likes the children. She's always yelling at them, forcing them to clean. They're just kids, you know?" I waited for Tom to defend me, to point out that basic tidiness wasn't child abuse. Instead, I heard him sigh heavily. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'll talk to her." That night, Tom confronted me in our bedroom. "Look at this place, Kristen. It's a mess. If you can't keep it clean with the kids here, maybe..." "Maybe what, Tom?" I challenged, already knowing where this was going. "Maybe you should consider quitting your job. If you were home full-time, you could keep the house in order without putting so much pressure on the kids." I laughed bitterly. "So now it's child labor to ask kids to clean up after themselves? Tom, do you hear yourself?" But he wasn't listening. He'd been pushing this agenda for weeks now, and I was exhausted from fighting it. "You know what, Tom? Fine. You want me to quit? I quit." His eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You mean it?" I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. "Yep, I'll call work tomorrow and tell them." Tom's face broke into a wide grin. He hugged me tightly, not noticing how stiff I was in his embrace. "Oh, Kristen, this is great. You'll see, everything will be better now." The next day, I did call work, but not to quit. I spoke with my boss and explained that I needed to take a 3-month unpaid leave for family reasons. Thankfully, I'd recently trained an intern who could cover for me. My boss was understanding and approved my request. When I told Tom I'd quit, he beamed with pride, shooting a triumphant look at Sarah. "See? I told you Kristen would come around. She understands the importance of family." As I watched them share their moment of victory, I felt like a stranger in my own home. But I reminded myself that this was temporary. 3 months. I'd given myself 3 months to see how this situation would play out, to see if Tom would realize the mistake he was making. The next morning, as Tom left for work, he kissed me on the cheek. "Have a great day at home, honey. I know you'll do a fantastic job." I forced a smile, waving as he drove away. Then I turned to face the mess that awaited me inside. Sarah was already on the couch, TV remote in hand, while her kids ran around, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. From the day I quit my job, my life transformed into an endless cycle of chores and childcare. I'd wake up at dawn, prepare breakfast for everyone, pack Tom's lunch, and then spend the rest of the day cleaning, cooking, and looking after Sarah's kids. Meanwhile, Sarah lived like she was on a perpetual vacation. Days blurred together in a haze of domestic duties. Sarah would swan out of the house, off to shop or meet friends for coffee, leaving her children in my care without so much as a backward glance. I'd watch her drive away in Tom's car, while I was left stranded at home, juggling housework and childcare. Tom, for his part, seemed oblivious to the imbalance. He'd come home, kiss me on the cheek, and ask, "How was your day, honey?" As if I'd chosen this life, as if I was living my dream instead of his sister's. One evening, as I was serving dinner, a meal I'd spent hours preparing while Sarah napped, Tom made an announcement. "So, Sarah's birthday is coming up next month," he said, grinning. "I've got something special planned." Sarah clapped her hands excitedly. "Ooh, do tell!" Tom shook his head. "It's a surprise, but clear your schedule for the evening of the 15th. On the evening of Sarah's birthday, we all piled into Tom's car and headed to LeBlanc, the most expensive restaurant in town. It was the kind of place Tom and I used to dream about going for our anniversaries, but always decided the money would be better spent on our house fund. Tom's parents were already there when we arrived, cooing over Sarah and barely acknowledging my existence. As we settled into our seats, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in on this family celebration. Throughout the meal, the conversation revolved around Sarah, her struggles, her strength, her dreams. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, feeling increasingly invisible. After the main course, Tom stood up, gently tapping his glass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast to my incredible sister, Sarah. You've been through so much, and you handle it all with such grace. I'm in awe of your strength." Sarah beamed, soaking in the praise. Tom continued, "And to celebrate your birthday, I have a special surprise." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. For a split second, my heart leaped. Was this all an elaborate ruse? Was he actually going to surprise me with a gift to thank me for my sacrifices? But then he turned to Sarah and held out the box. "Sarah, you've mentioned how hard it is getting around with the kids. So..." He opened the box, revealing a set of car keys. "Happy birthday, sis. Your very own car, just like you've always wanted." The table erupted in applause and exclamations of delight. Sarah jumped up, hugging Tom tightly. "Oh my God, Tom! I can't believe it. You're the best brother ever." I sat there, frozen in shock. A car. He had bought her a car. My mind flashed back to all the times I had mentioned needing a second car, all the times Tom had said we couldn't afford it, that we needed to save for our house. "Tom," I said, trying to keep my tone even, "can I ask why you bought such an expensive gift for Sarah?" The table fell silent, all eyes turning to us. Tom's smile faltered slightly. "Well, Sarah needs a car. She has 2 kids, and it's hard for her to get them to the park or the doctor. Plus, she'll need it when she starts working soon." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about me? I've been asking for a second car for months." Tom's expression hardened. "You're at home all day, Kristen. You don't need a car." The injustice of it all hit me like a physical blow. "How much did this car cost, Tom?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. $20,000. The room started to spin. $20,000? Where did you get that kind of money? Tom cleared his throat. "I took it from our joint account, but don't worry, I'll put it back as soon as I get my bonus at work." Something inside me snapped. "You took our savings without even discussing it with me? That was our house fund, Tom. I want you to return that money right now." "Kristen," Tom's mother gasped, "how can you be so selfish? Your sister-in-law needs this car." But I was beyond caring about their opinions. Years of frustration poured out of me. Selfish? I've given up everything for this family. My job, my dreams, my identity. Tom's face was red with anger. "If you're going to be so greedy and inflexible, fine. I'll take out a loan and put the money back in our account. Happy now?" "No," I shouted, beyond caring about the scene we were causing. "I don't want you taking out a loan. I want you to sell the car and put our savings back where they belong." Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "See, Tom? I told you she was controlling. She's trying to make you henpecked." Tom's parents nodded in agreement. "Kristen," his father said sternly, "you need to learn your place. Tom is the head of the household." I felt like I was drowning, surrounded by people who didn't see me as a person, just an accessory to their perfect family narrative. Tom stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's enough, Kristen. You've ruined everyone's evening with your behavior. Don't you know how to act in public?" Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I stood up, grabbing my purse. "I'm leaving." "Good!" Tom shouted, no longer caring about the other restaurant patrons staring at us. "Get out! You ungrateful freeloader. I'm the one who earns the money in this family, and you should be obeying me. Maybe if you got a job, you'd have a right to an opinion." His words hit me like physical blows. I wanted to scream that I hadn't actually quit my job, that I was on leave, but the words stuck in my throat. What was the point? They'd already made up their minds about who I was. As I walked out of the restaurant, I could hear Tom continuing his tirade. "She lives off my hard work and then has the audacity to question my decisions. Can you believe it?" The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, tears finally spilling over. I had never felt so humiliated, so angry, so done. I arrived at our apartment, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The nanny looked up in surprise as I burst in, tear-stained and disheveled. I went to our bedroom and pulled out my suitcase. With mechanical movements, I began packing my clothes, toiletries, and a few precious mementos. I left a note for Tom, brief and to the point. "I'm staying at a hotel. Don't try to contact me." The hotel room was small and impersonal, but it felt like a sanctuary. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling the weight of expectations and disappointment crushing me. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the evening's events in my mind. By morning, I knew what I had to do. As soon as the law offices opened, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Sarah Garcia came highly recommended, known for her fair but firm approach. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, shaking my hand, "tell me what brings you here today." I poured out my story, the gradual erosion of my marriage, the financial betrayal, the public humiliation. Sarah listened attentively, taking notes. "Based on what you've told me," she said when I finished, "you have a strong case for divorce. Your husband's actions with the joint account are particularly concerning. Let's draft the initial paperwork." Over the next few days, I threw myself into creating a new life. I found a small apartment, not far from my office. I called my boss and explained the situation, asking to end my leave early. She was understanding and welcomed me back with open arms. As I settled into my new routine, I hoped for an amicable divorce. I wasn't out for revenge. I just wanted what was fair. I suggested mediation to Tom, thinking it would be the quickest and least painful way to end things. "I'm not asking for much," I told him during our first session. "Just return the money you spent on Sarah's car, and we'll split the remaining joint account 50-50. Tom scoffed. "Return the money? That car was a gift to my sister. You're being ridiculous." The mediator tried to intervene, but it was clear Tom wasn't budging. After 3 fruitless sessions, I realized we'd have to go to court. The next few months were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and court appearances. Tom fought me every step of the way, painting me as a gold digger trying to rob his poor sister of her much-needed vehicle. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge made her ruling. The court finds that Mr. Johnson's use of joint funds to purchase a vehicle for his sister, without the consent of his spouse, was illegal. Mr. Johnson is ordered to reimburse Mrs. Johnson for half the value of the vehicle, as well as legal fees. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't about the money. It was about justice, about having my voice heard and my rights recognized. Tom's face was a mask of fury as we left the courthouse. "I hope you're happy," he spat. "You've gotten your pound of flesh, you greedy, petty woman." Over the next few weeks, Tom complied with the court order, transferring the money to my account. I later learned he'd had to take out a loan to cover it, but I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty. He'd made his choices, and now we both had to live with the consequences. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I had settled into a comfortable routine. My small apartment had become a haven, filled with peace and the simple joys I'd forgotten during my tumultuous marriage. I'd rekindled old friendships, thrown myself into my work, and even started a small herb garden on my balcony. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I heard an unexpected knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I approached cautiously and peered through the peephole. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Tom standing there, looking disheveled and anxious. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the door. "Kristen," Tom said, his voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He looked around my apartment, taking in the cozy, organized space. "You look good," he said softly. "The place looks nice." "Thanks," I replied, my guard up. "What brings you here, Tom?" He sank onto my couch, running his hands through his hair. I messed up, Kristen. I see that now. I came to apologize and, well, to ask for your help." I sat in the armchair across from him, waiting silently for him to continue. "I lost my job," he blurted out. "The company downsized, and I was let go. I'm still paying off the loan for Sarah's car, and I'm barely making ends meet. Sarah, she refuses to sell the car or get a job. Says she's not ready yet." A part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction at hearing this, but I pushed it aside. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tom, but I'm not sure how I can help." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "The apartment is a disaster. Sarah doesn't clean, and the kids are out of control. The landlord's threatening to evict us because of the noise and mess. I realize now that you were right about everything. Sarah's not just going through a rough patch, she's taking advantage. And I let her." I sat there, taking in his words. The vindication I felt was bittersweet. Yes, I had been right. But at what cost? "Kristen," Tom continued, his voice breaking, "I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping maybe we could start over. I've learned my lesson. I miss you, miss us. Maybe with your help, we could fix things." For a moment, I was transported back to the early days of our marriage. The love, the dreams we shared, the future we'd planned together. But then I remembered the betrayal, the humiliation, the months of feeling invisible and unvalued. I took a deep breath. "Tom, I appreciate your apology, and I'm sorry you're going through a tough time. But I can't go back." His face fell. "But Kristen, I've changed. I see things clearly now." I shook my head gently. "The thing is, Tom, I've changed too. These past few months have shown me what I'm capable of, what I deserve. If you betrayed me once, who's to say you wouldn't do it again when things get tough?" "I wouldn't," he insisted. "I've learned my lesson." "Maybe you have," I conceded, "but that doesn't change the fact that I'm happier now. I've found freedom in being on my own, in making my own choices without having to consider a partner who doesn't value my input." Tom's shoulders slumped. "So that's it? There's no chance for us?" I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "I think it's best if you go, Tom. I truly hope things get better for you, but I'm not the solution to your problems. You need to stand on your own 2 feet and make your own choices." He nodded slowly, getting to his feet. At the door, he turned to me one last time. "I really am sorry, Kristen, for everything." "I know," I said softly. "Goodbye, Tom." As I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it, letting out a long breath. A mix of emotions swirled within me. Sadness for the dreams we'd once shared, a touch of schadenfreude at Tom's comeuppance, but most of all, an overwhelming sense of relief and freedom.
My name's Eva, and I grew up in what you might call an ordinary family. But let me tell you, there was nothing ordinary about how things played out. From the day I was born, I was the second fiddle in my parents' orchestra. My older brother, Tom, was their golden child, the apple of their eye. They had big dreams for him. He was going to take over our family's Chinese porcelain business and make it big. Me? I was just there. Tom got all the attention, all the praise, all the newest gadgets. Latest iPhone? Tom had it. Newest gaming console? Tom's. Cool party invitation? Tom's going. Me? I was lucky if I got Tom's hand-me-downs or a babysitter for the night. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't hate my parents or even Tom. I just didn't understand them. They were always trying to be something they weren't: richer, smarter, more important. It was all about appearances with them. Eva, stand up straight, Mom would hiss at family gatherings. And for goodness sake, smile. What will people think? I'd plaster on a fake smile and count the minutes until I could escape to my room. The only bright spot in all this was my grandparents, Mom's parents. They lived in a cozy little house across town, and visiting them was like stepping into another world. With them, I felt seen, loved. It was the only place I felt I could truly be myself. When Tom graduated high school, it was a big to-do. My parents threw a lavish party, invited all their important friends, and announced proudly that Tom would be attending some fancy-pants college they'd handpicked for him. Our boy's going places, Dad boasted, clapping Tom on the back. He'll make the family proud. Tom went to college, and I stayed at home. It's been a few years, and I researched schools, picked out a program I was passionate about. All I had to do was tell my parents. The next day, I gathered my courage and approached them at breakfast. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice shaking a little. "I've decided on the college I want to attend." They looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "College?" Dad scoffed. "You?" Mom laughed, a high, fake sound that set my teeth on edge. "Oh, Eva, don't be silly. You don't need college. You'll work in the shop with us." "But I want to study," I started, but Dad cut me off. "We're not wasting money on your education," he said firmly. "That money's going towards Tom's new car." I stood there, shocked into silence. Then Mom delivered the final blow. "Face it, Eva," she said, not unkindly, but with a patronizing smile. "You're just not college material. You'll be much happier in the shop." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All my dreams, all my hard work, meant nothing to them. I ran from the room, tears streaming down my face, and did the only thing I could think of. I called my grandparents. Tears streaming down my face, I could barely get the words out. "Grandma, they said I'm not college material," I sobbed into the phone. There was a moment of silence, then Grandpa's voice came on the line, firm and angry. "Pack your bags, Eva. We're coming to get you." An hour later, I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when my parents burst into my room. "What do you think you're doing?" Mom demanded. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice shaky but determined. Dad scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Where would you go?" Just then, the doorbell rang. I heard Grandpa's booming voice downstairs, and a wave of relief washed over me. "She's coming with us," Grandpa said as he appeared in my doorway, Grandma right behind him. "Now wait just a minute," Dad started, but Grandpa cut him off. "Eva's 18. She can live wherever she damn well pleases," he growled, "and right now she pleases to live with us." Mom tried to argue, but I was already hauling my suitcase down the stairs. As we drove away, I watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. I thought I'd feel sad, but all I felt was free. That night, over a home-cooked dinner, my grandparents laid out their plan. "We've been saving for years," Grandma said, reaching for my hand. "We always knew you were destined for great things, Eva. We want to pay for your college." And just like that, my life changed. I enrolled in the college of my dreams, ready to tackle whatever came my way. Every month, without fail, a small amount of money would appear in my account for accommodation, the note always said. I threw myself into my studies with a passion I never knew I had. Late nights in the library, heated debates in class, projects that challenged me in ways I'd never been challenged before. I loved every minute of it. One day, after presenting a particularly difficult project, my professor pulled me aside. "Eva, I'm impressed," she said, a rare smile on her usually stern face. "How would you like to intern at Stellar Corp this summer?" My jaw dropped. Stellar Corp was the most prestigious company in the city. Everyone wanted to work there. Are you serious?" I stammered. She nodded. "I'm recommending you personally. Don't let me down." I practically floated out of the classroom. Me, Eva, the girl who was not college material, landing an internship at Stellar Corp. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The future was wide open, and I was ready to grab it with both hands. I was in my 3rd year of college when the unexpected call came. My older brother Tom had already graduated and landed a job. He'd been bragging about some big promotion, and now my parents, who had hardly spoken to me in years, suddenly wanted me to come home to share in Tom's success. I spent the next few days debating whether to go. Part of me wanted to stay away, to protect the life I'd built for myself. But another part, well, maybe things had changed. Maybe they finally saw me differently. In the end, I decided to go. What's the worst that could happen, right? I arrived at my old house on Friday evening, feeling like a stranger as I walked up the familiar driveway. Mom answered the door, all smiles and air kisses. I'd just finished unpacking when I heard the front door open, and Tom's voice drift up the stairs. "Mom, Dad, we're here." Curious, I headed downstairs. Tom was standing in the living room, his arm around a pretty blonde girl I'd never seen before. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah," Tom announced, beaming, "my fiancée." Mom let out a squeal that could have shattered glass, while Dad pumped Tom's hand enthusiastically. I stood on the sidelines, feeling like an outsider at a party I hadn't been invited to. "It's nice to meet you," I said to Sarah, who smiled warmly at me. "You must be Eva. Tom's told me so much about you." I doubted that, but I appreciated the effort. As we all sat down, the story came out. Tom and Sarah had been dating all through college, and now that they'd graduated, they'd decided to tie the knot. "So Sarah," Mom said, leaning forward eagerly, "tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" Sarah smiled. "Oh, they're in business. They own a chain of high-end boutiques across the country." I swear I could see dollar signs light up in my parents' eyes. Dad puffed up like a peacock. "Well, we're thrilled to welcome you to the family," he declared. "Now about the wedding. I think we should spare no expense. In fact, I'd be happy to cover half the cost myself." I nearly choked on my drink. Half the wedding costs? This from the man who wouldn't spend a dime on my college education. "That's very generous," Sarah said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "But really, there's no need." "Nonsense," Dad boomed. "We want this to be the event of the season. Nothing but the best for my son and his bride." I caught Tom's eye across the room. He looked embarrassed? Uncomfortable? It was hard to tell. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. As the evening wore on, the wedding plans grew more and more extravagant. A 5-star venue, gourmet catering, designer dresses. My parents were going all out to impress Sarah's family. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Groaning, I dragged myself out of bed and crept down the stairs, curious about what new drama was unfolding. Tom and Sarah were standing in the living room, a sleek folder in Sarah's hands. My parents sat on the couch, looking confused. "What do you mean?" another city dad was saying, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Sarah opened the folder, revealing glossy photos of a stunning beach resort. "We've always dreamed of a destination wedding," she explained, her voice excited. "Look at this place, it's perfect." I watched as my father's eyes bulged at the price list Sarah handed him. This is ridiculous," he spluttered. "It's 3 times what we discussed." "But Dad," Tom argued, "you said you wanted the best. This is the best." Dad stood up, his fists clenched. "I meant the best in our hometown, where our friends can attend. Who's going to travel across the country for your wedding?" Our friends will, Sarah said softly, looking hurt. The argument escalated quickly. Dad insisted on a local wedding, while Tom and Sarah stood their ground on the destination plan. I stood in the corner, feeling like I was watching a tennis match, my head swiveling back and forth between the two sides. Finally, Dad exploded. Enough. It's either a wedding here the way I want it, or you're on your own. The room fell silent. Tom's face hardened, a look I'd never seen before. Fine, he said coldly, we'll do it on our own. With that, he grabbed Sarah's hand and stormed out, slamming the door behind them. Dad collapsed onto the couch, his face in his hands. Mom fluttered around him, murmuring soothing words. I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do. I'm going to head back to college, I said quietly. Neither of them responded. I packed my bags and left, grateful to escape the tension-filled house. Back at college, I threw myself into my studies, trying to forget the family drama. Weeks turned into months and life went on. I was deep into my final project when I got the call that changed everything. Is this Eva Thompson? A formal voice asked. Yes, that's me, I replied, my heart racing. This is Mr. Johnson from Johnson Associates law firm. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your grandparents, Robert and Margaret Thompson, were in a car accident 3 days ago. I'm sorry to inform you that they didn't survive. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My grandparents. Gone? It couldn't be true. They were the only ones who had ever truly believed in me, supported me. And now... Miss Thompson, the lawyer's voice brought me back to reality. There's something else we need to discuss. Your grandparents will. I listened in a daze as Mr. Johnson explained that I was the sole beneficiary. My grandparents had left me everything, their cozy house, their savings, everything. I sat on my bed after the call ended, trying to process it all. Grief for my grandparents warred with disbelief over my inheritance. I was now the owner of a house and had a substantial amount of money in the bank. The dust had barely settled on my grandparents' funeral when the vultures started circling. I was still trying to process my grief when Tom showed up at my door, all smiles and fraternal love. Eva, sis, he exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt about as genuine as a $3 bill. How you holding up? I stepped back, eyeing him warily. I'm managing. What are you doing here, Tom? He sauntered into my apartment like he owned the place, making himself comfortable on my couch. Well, I heard about Grandma and Grandpa's will. That's quite a windfall you got there, huh? And there it was. I crossed my arms, already knowing where this was heading. Look, Eva, Tom said, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I knew all too well. Sarah and I, we're still trying to put together our dream wedding, and now that you've come into some money. I cut him off. No, Tom, I'm not paying for your wedding. His face fell, then hardened. Come on, Eva. Don't be selfish. It's not like you earned that money. We all know you were just sucking up to them to get their money. The accusation hit me like a slap in the face. How dare you, I hissed. I loved them. They were the only ones who ever believed in me. Yeah, because you played them like a fiddle. Tom was on his feet now, shouting, Poor little Eva, so neglected. Give me a break. At least I'm not a spoiled brat who thinks the world owes him a fancy wedding, I shot back. We went back and forth, hurling accusations and old grievances at each other. Years of resentment and hurt came pouring out. By the time Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I was shaking with anger and hurt. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, my phone exploded with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, my parents had been busy. How could you be so selfish, Eva? Your poor brother just wants a nice wedding. I always knew you were trouble. The messages went on and on. I called my parents, demanding an explanation. Well, what did you expect? Mom sniffed, refusing to help your own brother. It's shameful. You didn't want to pay for his ridiculous wedding either, I reminded her. That's different, Dad chimed in. We're his parents. You're just being greedy with your inheritance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Greedy? I worked my ass off in college while you two showered Tom with everything he wanted. Watch your language, young lady, Mom scolded. This is exactly why we always preferred Tom. He knows how to behave in polite society. Over the next few weeks, the family divide grew wider. Invitations to family events stopped coming. My cousins unfriended me on social media. It was like I'd been erased from the family tree overnight. At first it hurt. A lot. But as the days went by, I started to feel relieved. No more pretending, no more walking on eggshells, no more feeling like the family disappointment. I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. I had 1 semester left, and I was determined to graduate with honors. My grandparents had believed in me, had given me this amazing gift. I wasn't about to let them down. The day I graduated from college should have been one of the happiest of my life. Instead, I felt empty. There was no one in the audience cheering for me, no proud parents taking photos, no celebratory dinner afterwards. I collected my diploma and went home alone. The next few weeks were a blur of job applications and interviews. I was determined to make something of myself, to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was worth something. Then, out of the blue, my phone buzzed with a message from Tom. I nearly dropped it in shock. Hey Eva, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm getting married next month. It would mean a lot if you could come. Call me. I stared at the message for a long time before finally hitting the call button. Eva, Tom's voice was hesitant. Thanks for calling. Look, I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you, how we all treated you. I was a spoiled brat, and I'm sorry. I was stunned into silence. You're my sister, Eva, he continued. You and our whole family, you're important to me. I want everyone there for my big day. Please say you'll come. I felt a lump in my throat. I'll think about it, I managed to say before hanging up. The day of the wedding arrived, and I found myself standing outside an elegant hotel, clutching an expensive gift and feeling like I was about to walk into the lion's den. The venue was stunning. Flowers everywhere, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. For a moment I felt underdressed in my simple cocktail dress. I spotted Tom across the room, looking dashing in his tuxedo. Taking a deep breath, I made my way over to him. Congratulations, I said, forcing a smile. Tom's face lit up. Eva, you came. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment I let myself believe that everything might be okay. We chatted for a few minutes and I started to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Then I saw them. Mom and Dad making their grand entrance. Mom was dripping in jewelry, Dad in a tux that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. They swept into the room like royalty, greeting guests with air kisses and condescending smiles. Oh darling, my son's wedding is just divine, I overheard Mom saying to another guest. Of course we spared no expense. Only the best for our Tom. I had to stifle a laugh. Same old Mom and Dad, always putting on a show. As the evening wore on, I did my best to avoid them, sticking to the edges of the room and making small talk with distant relatives who didn't seem to remember our falling out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The way Mom kept glancing at me, the hushed conversations that stopped when I walked by. It was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. The evening was in full swing when Dad clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. It's time for the family toast, he announced, beaming with pride. My stomach dropped. I hadn't prepared anything, but before I could protest, Mom was dragging me towards the stage. I stumbled after my parents, feeling like a lamb being led to slaughter. Dad started the speech, his voice thick with emotion. Tom, Sarah, we couldn't be prouder. Your love is an inspiration to us all. Mom chimed in. We've always been a close-knit family, supporting each other through thick and thin. I stood there, trying to keep a neutral expression, wondering what alternate reality they were living in. Then Dad dropped the bomb. In fact, we love Tom so much that we took out a substantial loan to pay for this beautiful wedding. Wait, what? I thought they'd refuse to pay for the destination wedding. But Dad wasn't finished. Of course we won't be paying back that loan ourselves. No, our wonderful daughter Eva has generously offered to cover it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I felt all the blood drain from my face as every eye in the room turned to me. What? I stammered, my voice echoing through the microphone. There must be some mistake. I never agreed to that. Mom's hand clamped down on my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Smile and agree, dear, she hissed through clenched teeth. But I was done playing along. I wrenched my arm free and stepped up to the microphone. I'm sorry, but this is the first I'm hearing about any loan. I never agreed to pay for Tom's wedding. The room erupted into shocked whispers. I saw Tom and Sarah exchanging panicked glances. Eva, darling, Mom said, her voice sickly sweet as she tried to salvage the situation. Don't be modest. We all know how generous you are with your inheritance. That was the last straw. Generous? You mean the inheritance you all tried to guilt me out of? The one you said I didn't deserve. Dad tried to grab the microphone, but I held on tight. I'm sorry, but I won't be paying for this wedding. I wasn't even consulted about it. You ungrateful little bastard, Dad snarled, forgetting the microphone was still on. His words echoed through the ballroom, causing several guests to gasp. Mom's carefully cultivated mask of politeness crumbled. We should have thrown you out on the street years ago. You're worthless, you hear me? Worthless. I stood there, shock and hurt warring inside me. Then, a calm settled over me. Without another word, I handed the microphone to the wide-eyed DJ and walked off the stage. As I made my way through the stunned crowd, I heard my parents' voices behind me, alternating between apologies to the guests and more insults hurled at my back. I made it to my car before the tears started. As I drove home, my phone exploded with messages, some supportive, most accusatory. I blocked them all. At home, I double-locked the door and sank to the floor, my mind reeling. Had this all been a setup? Had Tom's apology just been a ploy to get me to pay for his wedding? I felt sick, betrayed, angry, but underneath it all, there was a small spark of relief. The mask had finally come off. There was no more pretending, no more hoping for a family that clearly didn't want me. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes were puffy from crying, and my head pounded with the mother of all headaches. I was contemplating spending the entire day in bed when there was a knock at the door. Peering through the peephole, I was shocked to see Tom standing there, looking as rough as I felt. Eva, please, he called through the door. I've been trying to reach you all night. Can we talk? Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell, but curiosity won out. I opened the door a crack, eyeing him warily. What do you want, Tom? He held up his hands in surrender, to apologize, and explain. Please, can I come in? Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat at my small kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between us like a peace offering. I swear to you, Evie, I had no idea about Mom and Dad's plan, Tom began, his voice thick with emotion. When you stormed out, I confronted them. It was ugly. I snorted. Yeah, I bet. No, you don't understand, Tom insisted. Sarah and I, we never asked them for money. We were paying for the wedding ourselves. This whole loan thing, it was all their idea. They wanted to look good in front of Sarah's family. I felt a weight lift off my chest. So you didn't set you up? God, no, Eva. I meant what I said before the wedding. I want to make things right between us. As Tom talked, I saw a side of him I'd never seen before. He told me about how Sarah had opened his eyes to how dysfunctional our family was, how her parents treated their children with love and respect, not as pawns in some social climbing game. Sarah's parents are loaded, Tom said with a wry smile. But you'd never know it. They're the most down-to-earth people I've ever met. When they heard what happened, they offered to pay off Mom and Dad's loan. What? No, they can't do that, I protested. Tom held up a hand. Don't worry, I'm going to pay them back, every cent. But they wanted to do this for us, to give us a chance to start fresh without Mom and Dad's drama hanging over our heads. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but for once they weren't tears of frustration or anger. So what now, I asked. Tom reached across the table and took my hand. Now we start over. As a real family. Sarah and I want you in our lives, Eva. No strings attached. We talked for hours, really talked, for what felt like the first time in our lives. By the time Tom left, I felt like I'd gotten my brother back. The next few months were a whirlwind. I landed a job at a marketing firm, throwing myself into work with a passion I never knew I had. Tom and Sarah became regular fixtures in my life, dropping by for dinner or movie nights. One sunny afternoon, Tom and Sarah showed up at my door with matching grins. "We have news," Sarah said, practically bouncing with excitement. "You're going to be an aunt." I squealed and pulled them both into a hug. As we celebrated, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Our parents tried to worm their way back into our lives when they heard about the baby, but Tom and I stood firm. We were done with their manipulation and drama. It wasn't easy, cutting them out, but we had each other now. And sometimes, the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. I'm Meryl, and I grew up in what you'd call an ordinary family. Mom and Dad were hardworking folks, trying their best to raise 2 girls. That's right, I had a younger sister, Sarah. She came into this world 5 years after me, and boy, did she shake things up. From the get-go, I was the good kid. Studied hard, got along with everyone, never caused trouble. Sarah? She was a whole different story. I remember this one time when I was 10 and Sarah was 5. We were at the grocery store with Mom and Sarah wanted some candy. "No, Sarah," Mom said firmly. "We've got plenty of snacks at home." Sarah's face turned red. "But I want it now," she screamed, throwing herself on the floor. People started staring. Mom looked embarrassed, trying to calm Sarah down. But Sarah wouldn't budge. She kicked and screamed louder, "I hate you. You never let me have anything." That was just one of many incidents. As we grew older, things didn't get better. Sarah's behavior became more erratic. She'd have these intense mood swings, going from laughing to screaming in seconds. One day, Mom and Dad took Sarah to a psychologist. When they came back, I could tell something was up. They sat me down in the living room, looking all serious. "Meryl," Dad started, "we need to talk to you about Sarah." Mom chimed in. "The doctor says Sarah has something called a DHD. It means her brain works a bit differently." I nodded, not really understanding. "Is that why she acts out all the time?" "Yes, sweetie," Mom said. "And we need your help. We have to be extra patient with Sarah now." Little did I know that conversation would set the tone for the next decade of my life. Everything became about Sarah, her needs, her moods, her outbursts. And me? I was expected to be the understanding older sister, always patient, always forgiving. But let me tell you, it wasn't easy. As Sarah's behavior got worse, my parents' attention shifted more and more towards her. They were so afraid of upsetting her that they started giving in to her every whim. Meanwhile, I was left to fend for myself. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't neglected. But compared to the constant attention Sarah got, it felt like I was invisible sometimes. As the years went by, Sarah's behavior became a roller coaster ride. One week, she'd be almost normal, helping with chores, doing her homework, even being nice to me. But it never lasted. I remember one afternoon when I was 16. I came home from school to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, actually doing her math homework. "Hey, Sarah," I said, surprised. "How's it going?" She looked up and smiled. "Pretty good. I think I'm finally getting this algebra stuff." For a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things were finally turning around. But a week later, that hope was shattered. I was in my room studying when I heard a crash downstairs. Sarah was screaming at Mom. "I don't care about stupid school. You can't make me go then," came the sound of breaking glass. I sighed and put my headphones on. Just another day in our house. When I turned 17, things got even worse. I was trying to prepare for college applications, but Sarah seemed determined to make it impossible. One evening I was at my desk, deep in a practice SAT test. Suddenly, ear-splitting music blasted through the walls. I stormed into Sarah's room. "Can you turn that down? I'm trying to study." "Boo-hoo," she mocked. Poor Meryl needs to study. Well, I need to listen to music. Deal with it. I went to our parents, hoping they'd intervene. But their response left me speechless. Honey, Mom said, you know your sister has trouble controlling herself. Try to be understanding. Dad nodded. Maybe you could study at the library? We don't want to upset Sarah. I couldn't believe it. But what about me? Don't my needs matter? Mom patted my hand. Of course they do, sweetie. But Sarah's condition makes things difficult for her. We all need to make allowances. I went back to my room, fuming. It was always about Sarah, always. A few weeks later, Sarah dropped a bombshell at dinner. I want to go live with Grandma, she announced. Mom and Dad exchanged worried looks. Are you sure, honey, Mom asked. That's a big change. Sarah nodded. Grandma said I could come anytime. She'll let me do whatever I want. I held my breath, hardly daring to hope. To my surprise, my parents agreed. Maybe a change of scenery would be good for everyone, Dad said. As Sarah packed her bags, she cornered me in the hallway. Don't think you're getting rid of me, she hissed. Grandma's loaded, you know. She'll spoil me rotten and leave me everything in her will. You'll be working your ass off in college while I'm set for life. I just rolled my eyes. Whatever, Sarah. Just go. For the next 6 months, our house was peaceful. I could finally focus on my studies without constant interruptions. I aced my SATs and got accepted into a public college in another city. I'd been in college for a few months when I got the call. It was Mom, and she sounded exhausted. It's Sarah, she's back home. Your grandmother, she couldn't handle Sarah anymore. Said she was too disobedient, always causing trouble. She even blamed us for bad parenting. Now she won't talk to any of us. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of frustration and pity. I'm sorry, Mom. That must be tough. It is, she admitted. We're trying everything. Taking her to a new psychologist, giving her whatever she wants. We're hoping it'll help. Then came the kicker. Meryl, sweetie. About your college expenses, we can't help you anymore. All our money is going towards Sarah's treatment and, well, her demands. You'll need to support yourself from now on. After we hung up, I just sat there trying to process it all. Once again, Sarah had managed to upend my life without even being present. But I wasn't about to let this derail me. I found a part-time job at a local diner and called my grandmother. Of course I'll help you, dear Grandma said when I explained the situation. It's the least I can do after everything you've been through. True to her word, Grandma started sending me money for rent and even visited me a few times. During one of her visits, we had a heart-to-heart. You know, Meryl, she said, sipping her tea, I feel guilty about Sarah. I thought I could handle her, but still I'm glad I can help you. You deserve it, sweetheart. Those years in college were tough, but also liberating. For the first time, I was free from Sarah's shadow. I made friends, studied hard, and even started dating a bit. After graduation, I landed a job in the same city and decided to stay. It felt good to have my own life, away from the chaos at home. I did visit my parents occasionally, but Sarah was never around. One time I asked Mom about her. Oh, she's out with friends, Mom said, wringing her hands. She's been gone for days now. We can barely keep track of her anymore. Dad chimed in, always with different boys too. There's Jake, or was it John? And then there's that Mike fellow. I raised an eyebrow. And you're okay with this? Mom shrugged helplessly. What can we do? It's just how she is. The psychologist says it's part of her condition. I bit my tongue to keep from saying what I really thought. It was always excuses with them when it came to Sarah. During another visit, I found Mom crying in the kitchen. What's wrong? I asked, alarmed. She wiped her eyes. It's Sarah. She's been gone for 2 weeks this time. We don't know where she is or who she's with. I felt a pang of worry, despite everything. Have you called the police? Dad shook his head. We did once before. She came back on her own and was furious with us for reporting her missing. Said we were trying to control her life. I left that day feeling frustrated and sad. It was clear that nothing had changed. Sarah was still the center of their world, no matter how badly she behaved. As I drove back to my apartment, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the life I'd built for myself. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Time flies when you're building your own life. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since I'd graduated college. I was settling into my career, making new friends, and finally feeling like I had some stability. Then came the phone call that threw me for a loop. "Meryl? It's Mom. You'll never guess what's happened. Sarah's getting married." I nearly dropped the phone. "Married? Sarah." Mom's voice was brimming with excitement. "Yes, can you believe it? She just told us. The wedding's in 2 months. You'll come, won't you?" Still in shock, I agreed. The day of the wedding arrived, and I flew back home. As I helped Sarah get ready, she dropped another bombshell. "Mom and Dad are paying for our honeymoon," she said smugly. 2 weeks in Bali. First class all the way. I bit my tongue. Of course they were. "That's nice of them," I managed. Sarah smirked. "Well, they owe me. After all the crap I've been through." I wanted to point out that most of that crap was of her own making, but I held back. It was her wedding day, after all. When I finally met Sarah's fiancé, Mark, I was taken aback. He was nothing like I'd imagined. Tall, handsome, and at least 10 years older than Sarah, he exuded an air of calm confidence. "It's great to finally meet you, Meryl," he said, shaking my hand. "Sarah's told me so much about you." I raised an eyebrow at Sarah, wondering what exactly she'd told him. To my surprise, the wedding went off without a hitch. Sarah looked radiant, and for once, she seemed genuinely happy. As I watched them exchange vows, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this really would be the turning point for her. At the reception, Mom cornered me by the punch bowl. "Isn't this wonderful, Meryl?" she gushed. "Sarah's really landed on her feet. Mark's so successful, and he clearly adores her." I nodded, sipping my drink. "It's great, Mom. I'm happy for her." Then came the kicker. "You know, sweetie, maybe it's time you started thinking about settling down too. You're not getting any younger." I nearly choked on my punch. "Mom, I'm only 26. She patted my arm. "I know, dear. But look at Sarah. She's really got it all figured out now." As I flew back to my city the next day, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. Despite everything, I genuinely hoped Sarah had found happiness. But a small part of me wondered how long it would last. Life went on. I threw myself into work, trying not to dwell on my family's dynamics. Then, about a year after Sarah's wedding, something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Tom, and we hit it off immediately. He was kind, funny, and actually listened when I talked. For the first time, I felt like I'd found someone who saw me for who I really was. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of dates, laughter, and deepening love. Then, on a crisp autumn evening, Tom got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. As I said yes, tears of joy streaming down my face, I felt like my life was finally falling into place. Planning my wedding to Tom was like a dream. For once, I was the center of attention, and it felt amazing. I was determined to make it perfect, a day that was all about us and our love. Of course, I invited my family. Despite everything, they were still my parents, and Sarah was still my sister. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, this happy occasion would bring us all together. When Sarah showed up at the venue, she was alone. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Where's Mark?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Sarah shrugged. "Couldn't make it." "Is everything okay?" I pressed. "It's fine," she snapped. "Can we drop it?" I backed off, not wanting to start an argument on my wedding day. But later, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in hushed tones. "I'm worried about Sarah and Mark," Mom was saying. "They're fighting all the time now. But it's not her fault, she's just high-spirited. Mark needs to be more understanding." I walked away, shaking my head. Some things never change. The ceremony was beautiful, everything I'd dreamed of. Tom's eyes shone with love as we said our vows, and for a while I forgot all about the family drama. But at the reception, Sarah made sure she couldn't be ignored. She got drunk, loudly flirted with Tom's friends, and even tried to give a speech that quickly devolved into a rant about how unfair her life had been. I gritted my teeth and plastered on a smile, determined not to let her ruin my day. Tom, bless him, stuck by my side, squeezing my hand supportively. As Sarah was dragged off the dance floor by our embarrassed parents, I made a silent vow to myself. This was the last time I'd let her drama overshadow my life. For a while, it seemed like I might actually keep that vow. Tom and I settled into married life, and I heard little from my family beyond the occasional phone call. Then, almost exactly a year after our wedding, my phone rang. It was Mom, and she was crying. "Meryl, it's Sarah. Mark left her." Between sobs, Mom explained. Mark had found out about Sarah's multiple affairs and filed for divorce. She was devastated, they said, acting out worse than ever. "We don't know what to do," Mom wailed. "The psychologist says she needs a change of scenery, some time away to heal." I knew what was coming before she said it. "Honey, we were hoping. Could Sarah stay with you for a while? Remember how we sent her to your grandmother's so you could study for your exams? We need your help now." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of family obligations settling on my shoulders. "Let me talk to Tom," I said finally. After I hung up, I sat Tom down and explained the situation. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed with concern, but finally agreed. Sarah arrived on a Tuesday, looking like a shadow of her former self. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and she barely spoke above a whisper. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine pang of sympathy for my little sister. "Come on," I said gently, leading her to the guest room. "Let's get you settled in." Tom was amazing those first few days. He cooked Sarah's favorite meals, engaged her in light conversation, and even took a day off work to help us go shopping for some new clothes to cheer her up. But as the saying goes, no good deed goes unpunished. About a week into Sarah's stay, I started noticing changes. Small things at first, a lingering look here, an accidental brush against Tom there. I tried to brush it off as my imagination running wild. Then one day I came home from work to find Sarah parading around the living room in what could barely be called underwear. Tom was sitting on the couch, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "Sarah," I exclaimed. "What are you doing?" She turned, feigning innocence. "Oh, hi Meryl, I was just about to take a shower. It's so hot today, isn't it, Tom?" Tom mumbled something incoherent and practically ran from the room. That night, I confronted Sarah. "Look, I know you're going through a tough time, but you need to respect our home and our marriage." She rolled her eyes. "God, Meryl, don't be such a prude. I was just trying to cool off." I didn't buy it for a second, but I let it go. Big mistake. Over the next few days, Sarah's behavior became more and more brazen. She'd accidentally walk in on Tom in the bathroom, or bend over suggestively when he was around. I was at my wit's end. Then came the day that broke the camel's back. I came home early from work, a migraine pounding behind my eyes. As I approached our apartment, I heard Sarah's voice, loud and clear. "Come on, Tom, Meryl never has to know. Don't you want to have some real fun for once?" I burst through the door to find Sarah pressed up against my husband, her hands on his chest. Tom looked horrified. "Meryl," he exclaimed, pushing Sarah away. "This isn't what it looks like." Sarah spun around, a look of faux shock on her face. "Oh my God, Meryl, I'm so embarrassed. I just tripped and Tom caught me." I saw red. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Pack your things and get the hell out of my house. Now." Sarah's face contorted with rage. "Fine, I never wanted to stay in this dump anyway. You're pathetic, Meryl. Always so boring, so frigid." She turned to Tom, who was standing there in shock. "You could do so much better than her, you know. A hot piece like me instead of Ice Queen Meryl." I grabbed her arm and dragged her to the guest room. "You have 5 minutes to pack. or I'm throwing your stuff out the window. As Sarah scrambled to gather her things, hurling insults the whole time, I turned to Tom. He looked devastated. Meryl, I swear nothing happened. She's been trying for days, but I would never. I cut him off with a hug. I know. I trust you. I'm so sorry I put you through this. We held each other as we listened to Sarah's continued tirade. Finally, she emerged from the room, suitcase in hand. You'll regret this, she spat. Both of you. As the door slammed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. As we stood there in our now quiet apartment, I realized something. The family I'd spent my whole life trying to please, trying to fix, they weren't my real family anymore. Tom was. And it was time I started putting our life, our marriage, first. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee the next morning when my phone rang. It was Mom. I braced myself and answered. How could you, Meryl? Mom's voice was shrill with anger. Kicking your own sister out onto the street. I thought we raised you better than that. I took a deep breath. Mom, it's not what you think. But she cut me off. Sarah told us everything. How you got jealous because she and Tom were getting along. How you made up lies about her to justify throwing her out. I'm so disappointed in you. My jaw dropped. What? Mom, that's not true at all. Sarah tried to seduce Tom. She was walking around half naked, throwing herself at him. She even propositioned him. There was a pause. Then Dad's voice came on the line. Now, Meryl, don't you think you're exaggerating a bit? We know Sarah has her issues, but she's family, and family supports each other, no matter what. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. Support? Where was your support when I was trying to study for college and Sarah was making my life hell? Where was your support when you cut me off financially because you were too busy catering to Sarah's every whim? I spent my entire life trying to understand and make allowances for Sarah. And I'm done. I'm done being the responsible one, the one who always has to sacrifice. You raised her to be this way, and now you can deal with the consequences. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Dad spoke, his voice cold. If that's how you feel, maybe it's best we don't speak for a while. And don't be surprised if the rest of the family feels the same way once they hear about this. I laughed bitterly. Is that supposed to be a threat? Go ahead. Tell them whatever version of the story makes you feel better about your parenting failures. I hung up. True to my parents' word, the calls started coming in. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them expressing their shock and disappointment in my cruel treatment of Sarah. How could you abandon your sister in her time of need? My Aunt Linda scolded. I always knew you were jealous of Sarah, but this is a new low, cousin Mike messaged me. I tried explaining the truth to the first few, but it quickly became clear that their minds were made up. Sarah and my parents had spun a tale of my jealousy and cruelty, and the family had lapped it up. The final straw came when I logged onto Facebook. There, in black and white, was a post from Sarah. Heartbroken. My own sister threw me out when I needed her most. I guess blood isn't always thicker than water. Family drama betrayed. The comments were a cesspool of family members and old acquaintances expressing their sympathy for Sarah and their disgust with me. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I could respond, tell my side of the story. But what was the point? They'd already made up their minds. With a heavy heart, I began blocking numbers and unfriending relatives on social media. It hurt, cutting ties with people I'd known my whole life. But as I looked over at Tom, who had stayed by my side through all of this, I knew I was making the right choice. In the weeks that followed the fallout with my family, I felt like I was walking through a fog. The pain of being ostracized by my own relatives was raw and ever-present. But amidst the darkness, there was one beacon of light: my grandmother. Meryl, dear, she said during one of our weekly phone calls, I want you to know that I believe you. I know Sarah, and I know you. You did the right thing. Tears welled up in my eyes. Thanks, Grandma. You don't know how much that means to me. She chuckled softly. Oh, I think I do. Now tell me about your week. How's that wonderful husband of yours? And just like that, life went on. Tom and I settled into a peaceful routine, free from the drama that had plagued us for so long. We traveled, pursued our careers, and even started talking about starting a family of our own. Months passed, then a year. I heard snippets about my family through the grapevine. Sarah had moved back in with our parents, apparently unable to support herself after the divorce. But I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on my own life. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I hadn't seen in over a year, my parents. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello." "Meryl," it was my mother, her voice choked with tears. "Meryl, we need your help." A familiar weight settled in my stomach. "What's wrong?" Between sobs, she explained. Sarah had spiraled out of control. She was bringing strange men home, throwing wild parties, and had even physically threatened our parents when they tried to intervene. "She kicked us out." Meryl, Dad's voice came on the line. "We're staying at a motel. We don't know what to do. Can you come talk to her? Maybe she'll listen to you?" I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of emotions wash over me: anger, pity, frustration, but mostly I felt nothing. "No," I said quietly. "I can't." "But Meryl," Mom started. I cut her off. "No, Mom, I'm done. I've spent my entire life cleaning up Sarah's messes, making excuses for her behavior, and when I finally stood up for myself, you all turned your backs on me. This is your problem now. You raised her, you enabled her. Now you have to deal with the consequences." Before they could respond, I hung up. Then, with a sense of finality, I blocked their numbers. Tom found me on the couch a little while later, staring into space. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. I looked up at him and smiled. Really smiled. "You know what? It is. For the first time in my life, I think everything is actually okay." As we sat there, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, I had lost the family I was born into, but I had gained so much more. I had Tom, my rock and my partner. I had my grandmother who loved me unconditionally. And most importantly, I had myself stronger and more self-assured than ever before. The next day, I called my grandmother. "Hey, Grandma, how would you like to come visit for a while? Tom and I were thinking of redecorating the guest room, and we could use your expert eye." Her joy was palpable through the phone. "Oh, Meryl, I'd love to. When should I come?" As I hung up, making plans for my grandmother's visit, I realized something. This was what family should be. People who support you, love you, and bring joy to your life.
I never knew my father. He died when I was just 3, leaving behind nothing but a handful of photos and a single video of him holding me as a baby. My name's Elizabeth, and this is my story. Growing up with my mom wasn't easy. She was always afraid of being alone, cycling through boyfriends faster than I could learn their names. It was a revolving door of men, each one leaving as quickly as he came. The only stability in my life came from my grandmother, my mom's mother. She was my rock, my safe haven. Whenever things got too chaotic at home, which was often, Grandma would swoop in and take me to her place. "Come on, Elizabeth," she'd say, her voice warm and comforting. "Let's go make some cookies." Those weekends at Grandma's were like entering a different world. Her house was always quiet, peaceful. No shouting, no slamming doors, no strange men stumbling around in the middle of the night. Just me and Grandma, baking cookies, reading books, or tending to her small garden. I often wondered about my dad's parents. Mom told me they'd cut ties after Dad died, disapproving of her moving on so quickly. But I suspected there was more to the story. Mom wasn't exactly reliable when it came to the truth. School was my escape. I threw myself into my studies, partly because I enjoyed learning, but mostly because it was a distraction from the chaos at home. Mom was rarely involved in my education, or anything else in my life for that matter. I learned to be independent out of necessity. By the time I was 10, I was cooking my own meals, doing my own laundry, and helping myself with homework. Mom was too busy chasing her next relationship to bother with such trivial things. Everything changed when I turned 12. Mom finally got married to a man named Frank. She was over the moon, convinced he was her last chance at happiness. "This is it, Lizzie," she gushed. "We're finally going to be a real family." But Frank had other ideas. From day one, he made it clear that I was an inconvenience, a reminder of Mom's past that he'd rather forget. "Listen up, kid," he growled at me on the first night he moved in. "I don't want to see or hear you unless it's absolutely necessary. You stay in your room and keep out of our way. Got it?" Life under Frank's rule was a far cry from anything resembling a real family. He ruled our house with an iron fist, and I quickly learned that silence and invisibility were my best defenses. "You think you can just freeload off us?" Frank would snarl. "You're gonna earn your keep, girl." And earn it I did. Every penny spent on me was accounted for and expected to be repaid through chores and perfect grades. While my classmates sported new clothes and the latest phones, I shuffled around in hand-me-downs, clutching the ancient Nokia my grandmother had given me. "Why can't I have new clothes like everyone else?" I once dared to ask Mom. Her response was quick and dismissive. "We can't afford it, Lizzie. Be grateful for what you have." But I knew better. I'd seen the designer bags Mom brought home, heard the plans for weekend getaways with Frank. There was money, just not for me. At school, I stuck out like a sore thumb. But to my surprise, my classmates were kind. They never teased me about my outdated clothes or ancient phone. Instead, they often went out of their way to help. "Hey Liz, want a ride home?" Sarah, a girl from my math class, would often ask. Her mom would smile warmly at me from the driver's seat, a stark contrast to the cold shoulder I got at home. I'd gratefully accept, knowing the alternative was a long walk home. Mom and Frank had made it clear that picking me up from school was not on their list of priorities. "You've got 2 legs, don't you?" Frank would say. "Use 'em." At home, there was no rest. Frank had an endless list of chores for me to complete. Cleaning, cooking, laundry, the work never stopped. And heaven forbid if I tried to take a break. "What do you think you're doing?" Frank's voice would boom if he caught me sitting idly. There's always work to be done in this house. Homework was to be completed perfectly, with Frank regularly checking my grades. Anything less than excellent was unacceptable. "A B-," he roared one day, waving my report card in my face. "You think that's good enough? No TV for a week. And forget about seeing your little friends." I'd nod silently, fighting back tears. The punishments were harsh, but arguing only made things worse. So I'd retreat to my room, bury my face in my pillow, and let the tears flow silently. Weekends at Grandma's became my lifeline. But even those were under threat. Frank had discovered a new form of punishment, denying me my visits to Grandma's house. "You failed that history test," he'd say with a cruel smile. "Looks like you'll be staying home this weekend to study." It broke my heart to lie to Grandma when she called, worried about my absence. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I'd say, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. "I've just got so much schoolwork. I'll come next weekend, I promise." But next weekend would come, and Frank would find another reason to keep me home. It was a vicious cycle, and I felt powerless to break it. As I approached my 15th birthday, I made a decision. I needed some independence, some way to escape the suffocating control at home. So I applied for a job at the local diner. To my surprise, Frank approved. "About time you started contributing," he grunted. The diner became my sanctuary. The owner, a kind-hearted woman named Marge, took me under her wing from day one. She was everything my mother wasn't: caring, attentive, and genuinely interested in my life. She'd often let me leave early, especially on weekends. Those stolen hours with Grandma were precious. I'd arrive at her house, breathless and grinning, and she'd welcome me with open arms. "Elizabeth, my dear, what a lovely surprise," she'd exclaim, pulling me into a warm hug. I never told Grandma the whole truth about life at home. I couldn't bear to see the worry in her eyes, or worse, risk her confronting Mom and potentially losing my visitation rights altogether. So I kept my struggles to myself, painting a rosier picture than reality. As my 18th birthday approached, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things would change. Perhaps Mom and Frank would finally see me as an adult, worthy of respect and kindness. How naive I was. The morning of my 18th birthday, I woke up with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I got dressed carefully, putting on the nicest outfit I owned, a hand-me-down blouse from a cousin and a skirt I'd found at a thrift store. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my room, half expecting balloons or a happy birthday banner. Instead, I was met with Mom's cold stare. "Oh good, you're up," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I have news. I'm pregnant, we'll need your room for the baby. You can go wherever you want, but you can't stay here anymore." I stood there, stunned. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined for my 18th birthday, this hadn't even been on the list. "But, this is my home," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's eyes hardened. "This is my house, Elizabeth. You've been a burden on Frank for far too long. I need a calm environment for my pregnancy, and frankly, you stress him out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A burden? A source of stress? Was that all I was to them? "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, fighting back tears. Mom shrugged, her indifference like a knife to my heart. "Go live with your grandmother. Get a job. I don't have money for college, so you're on your own there. But I expect you to come back daily to clean the house while Frank's at work. I can't do it in my condition." With that, she thrust a hastily packed bag into my hands and all but pushed me out the door. The lock clicked behind me with a chilling finality. I stood on the porch, my meager possessions at my feet, trying to process what had just happened. On my 18th birthday, instead of celebration, I'd been discarded like yesterday's trash. I trudged up the familiar path to Grandma's house, my eyes red and puffy from crying. Before I could even knock, the door swung open, and there stood Grandma, her face lighting up at the sight of me. "Elizabeth, happy birthday, my dear," she exclaimed, pulling me into a warm embrace. Then, noticing my tear-stained face and the bag at my feet, her expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I broke down again, sobbing into her shoulder as I recounted the morning's events. Grandma listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "That girl. I can't believe she'd do this to her own daughter," she muttered, shaking her head. Then, squeezing my shoulders gently, she said, "Well, you're always welcome here, Elizabeth. Always." She ushered me inside, where I was greeted by the mouth-watering aroma of freshly baked cookies, my favorite chocolate chip ones. "I was hoping you'd stop by today," Grandma said with a wink. "Come on, let's get some food in you." As I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by all my favorite treats, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. Grandma bustled around, pouring me a glass of milk and piling a plate high with cookies, mini sandwiches, and fruit. "Now," she said, sitting across from me, "we're not going to let your mother's foolishness ruin your special day. Why don't you call up some of your friends? We'll have a little party right here in the backyard." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I hugged her tightly before reaching for my phone. Within an hour, several of my classmates had arrived, bearing gifts and warm wishes. The backyard was soon filled with laughter and chatter. The smell of grilling burgers and hot dogs wafted through the air as we played games, shared stories, and simply enjoyed each other's company. For the first time in years, I felt truly celebrated. As the afternoon wore on, I made frequent trips into the house to refill the pitcher of Grandma's famous homemade lemonade. During one such trip, I overheard Grandma on the phone in the living room. "Yes, that's right. It's time," she was saying, her voice low but firm. "I think you should come as soon as possible. Tomorrow morning would be perfect." I paused, curious. Who was she talking to? And what was it time for? But before I could ponder further, I heard her wrapping up the call. "All right, I'll see you then. Thank you," she said before hanging up. When I entered the living room with the refilled pitcher, Grandma was there, smiling as if nothing had happened. Having fun, dear? She asked brightly. I nodded, deciding not to ask about the mysterious phone call. Whatever it was, I trusted Grandma. After all, she was the one person who had never let me down. The morning after my birthday, I woke up in Grandma's guest room, feeling more rested than I had in years. I was helping Grandma with the dishes when there was a knock at the door. To my utter shock, it was Mom. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Can we talk?" I stood frozen, unsure how to respond. Grandma gently squeezed my shoulder and nodded, so I stepped aside to let Mom in. She looked different. Smaller somehow, and definitely nervous. In her hands, she clutched a gift-wrapped package. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Mom began, her eyes darting around the room. "I don't know what came over me. Here, I got you a birthday present." I took the package mechanically, too stunned to speak. "Please, Elizabeth," Mom continued, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Come home. We can work this out." Grandma, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I'm glad you've come to your senses, dear," she said to Mom, her tone firm but not unkind. "But I'm afraid it's too late to change things now." Mom opened her mouth to argue, but at that moment, the front door opened. An elderly couple stepped in, and I watched in confusion as all the color drained from Mom's face. "Hello, Elizabeth," the woman said warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Happy belated birthday." The man beside her smiled and added, "We've been waiting a long time to meet you, sweetheart." Grandma stepped forward. "Elizabeth, these are your paternal grandparents. I asked them to come." My mind was reeling. The grandparents I'd never known, the ones Mom had always said wanted nothing to do with me, were here? And Grandma had invited them? They enveloped me in a warm hug, and I found myself instinctively relaxing into their embrace. "We have a lot to tell you, Elizabeth," my grandfather said, his voice gentle but firm. "Starting with the truth about your home." Over the next hour, they unraveled a story that left me speechless. The house I'd grown up in, the one I'd been unceremoniously kicked out of just yesterday, actually belonged to me. It had been left to me by my father and put in my name by my paternal grandparents after his death. "Your mother was allowed to live there with you," my grandmother explained, shooting a pointed look at Mom, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "But now that you're 18, it's your decision who lives there." I sat there, trying to process this bombshell. All those years of feeling like a burden, of being told I should be grateful for a roof over my head, and the house had been mine all along? "I own the house?" I stammered, my mind struggling to grasp this new reality. My grandparents nodded, while Mom sat silent. As I sat there, still reeling from the revelation about the house, my paternal grandmother gently took my hand. "There's more, Elizabeth," she said, her voice soft but firm. My grandfather nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We've been sending your mother a monthly allowance ever since your father passed away," he explained. "It was meant to cover your expenses, clothes, school supplies, anything you needed." I felt my jaw drop. All those years of wearing hand-me-downs, of being told we couldn't afford new clothes or school trips. Had it all been a lie? "We wanted to be part of your life, to help raise you," my grandmother continued. "But your mother, she was against it." I glanced at Mom, who was standing in the corner of the room, her face a mask of discomfort and shame. "We didn't want to cause any trouble," my grandfather added. "So we kept in touch through your grandmother here. She's been sending us photos and updates about you all these years." Grandma nodded, squeezing my shoulder supportively. "And that's not all," my grandmother said. "We've been saving for your college education. We gave the money to your mother to set aside for you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "College money?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned to Mom, who was now visibly squirming. "You told me there was no money for college. You told me I was on my own." The room fell silent, all eyes on my mother. She opened and closed her mouth several times, no words coming out. Finally, Grandma spoke, her voice uncharacteristically stern. "Tell her the truth, Amanda. You owe her that much." Mom's face cycled through various shades of red and white. We, she stammered, then took a deep breath. "Frank and we spent the money." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was in a surreal dream, or rather, a nightmare. "You did what?" My paternal grandmother's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Mom flinched. We needed it. We bought a car," she finally blurted out. "A car," my grandfather repeated incredulously. "A luxury car," Mom added, as if that somehow made it better. "We needed it. Frank's job, appearances are important, you know." I stared at her, unable to comprehend the level of selfishness and deceit. All those years of scrimping and saving, of being told I was a burden, and they had been living it up with money meant for me? The room fell into a stunned silence as the magnitude of my mother's betrayal sank in. I felt a surge of anger rise within me, hot and fierce. "You're a fraud," I spat out, my voice trembling with rage. "You kicked me out of my own house after robbing me blind for years." Mom's eyes widened, and she held up her hands defensively. No, Elizabeth, you've misunderstood everything," she pleaded. I was going to surprise you for your birthday. I was going to tell you about the house and the money." I couldn't help it, I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you surprised me all right," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Kicking me out on my 18th birthday was quite the surprise." "Congratulations, Mom. Mission accomplished." My paternal grandfather stepped forward, his face stern. "Amanda," he said, addressing my mother, "you need to return the money for Elizabeth's education. Immediately." Mom's face contorted with anger. "I'm not giving anything back," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea how hard it's been raising her on my own? That money is compensation for everything I've done." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Everything you've done?" I echoed incredulously. "You mean neglecting me, making me feel like a burden, and stealing from me?" Mom turned to me, her eyes wild. "Elizabeth, stop this nonsense and come home right now," she demanded. Something inside me snapped. "It's my house, and I want you and Frank out. Now." Mom's face crumpled, and she pointed at her stomach. But I'm pregnant," she whimpered. "You can't throw us out. Where will we go?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt, just a profound weariness. I could see that while her pregnancy might be real, her tears were just another manipulation tactic. "That's not my problem," I said quietly. "You should have thought about that before you stole my future." Grandma stepped forward and put her arm around my shoulders. "I think it's time for you to leave, Amanda," she said firmly. "You've done enough damage." As Mom continued to sob and plead, my paternal grandparents exchanged a look. "We'll be pursuing legal action to recover the stolen funds," my grandfather stated. "And we'll be helping Elizabeth secure her property." I watched as my mother's face cycled through shock, anger, and fear. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, not the loving mother I'd always longed for, but a selfish, manipulative woman who had put her own desires above her child's well-being. The weeks following that fateful confrontation were a whirlwind of legal consultations, paperwork, and emotional upheaval. With the support of my grandparents, both sets of them, I found the strength to stand up for myself and pursue justice. We filed multiple lawsuits, one for compensation for moral damages, another for the misuse of the monthly allowance my paternal grandparents had been sending, and a third for the return of my college fund. Each document I signed felt like a step towards reclaiming my life. The most difficult lawsuit to file was the eviction notice for Mom and Frank. Despite everything, a small part of me still hesitated. Was I doing the right thing? "You're not leaving them homeless, Elizabeth," Grandma reassured me, sensing my doubt. "They're adults who made their choices. Now it's time for you to make yours." The day of the court hearing arrived all too quickly. I sat in the courtroom, my stomach in knots, as the judge reviewed our case. Mom and Frank sat on the other side, shooting me venomous glares. As the judge began to speak, I held my breath. In the case of Elizabeth versus Amanda and Frank Thompson, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Elizabeth. The relief that washed over me was indescribable. The judge continued, detailing the court's decision: full compensation for moral damages, repayment of all misused funds, return of my college fund, and the eviction of Mom and Frank from my house. I watched as Mom's face contorted with rage. She jumped to her feet, screaming obscenities, while Frank sat stone-faced beside her. As the bailiff escorted them out, Mom's final words rang in my ears. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you." Those words, once so hurtful, now held no power over me. I knew the truth, and no amount of guilt-tripping could change that. The following weeks were a flurry of activity. Mom and Frank moved out, leaving the house in a state of disarray. It was cathartic, in a way, to clean and reorganize, erasing the traces of their presence from my life. With my newly recovered funds, I was able to enroll in a prestigious college in another city. The day I received my acceptance letter, I cried tears of joy, something I hadn't done in years. As I packed for college, I couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of changes in my life. In just a few short months, I'd gone from a neglected, gaslighted teenager to a homeowner and college student with a supportive family. The day of my departure was bittersweet. I hugged Grandma tightly, promising to call often. "Don't worry about the house," she assured me. "I'll keep an eye on things while you're gone." My paternal grandparents drove me to my new campus, helping me move into my dorm room. As we said our goodbyes, my grandfather pressed a small box into my hand. "It was your father's," he explained. "We thought you should have it." Inside was a beautiful watch, engraved with the words, "Time reveals truth." How fitting, I thought, considering recent events. As I settled into college life, I found myself thriving. Free from the constant stress and negativity of my old life, I discovered a passion for learning and a confidence I never knew I possessed. I made new friends, joined clubs, and even started volunteering at a local youth center, hoping to help other kids who might be in situations similar to what I had experienced. Throughout it all, I maintained close contact with both sets of grandparents. Weekend visits home became something I looked forward to, filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of true family. As for Mom and Frank, I heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to another state. Mom had given birth to a baby girl. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for my half-sister, hoping she wouldn't endure what I had. But I knew it wasn't my responsibility. I had my own life to live now,